Climbing a mountain is epic, but Mount Fuji? That's next level. Japan's tallest peak is a brutal, treacherous beast, a challenging accomplishment, and one man who is about to conquer it wants to mark the achievement. And what better way to show the whole world than snapping a selfie atop a mountain in freezing cold temperatures? What could go wrong? Well, it turns out a whole lot. Find out more on today's episode of The Infographics Show. Embarrassingly stupid ways people died, Darwin Awards winners. The Darwin Awards, the controversial and darkly funny award ceremony, honors the few, the proud, the stupid, who managed to remove themselves from the gene pool permanently. There are only two rules. The person must die or render themselves unable to reproduce through other means, and they can't remove anyone else from the gene pool in the process. Now let's see how a king would grace the Darwin Awards in royal fashion. The kings of France often met interesting fates, as Louis XVI found out when he met Madame Guillotine. But almost a millennium earlier, his predecessor in the name, Louis III, didn't need any outside help to take out his own head. The young king of West Francia had only reigned for 3 years, but it was a reign filled with military success against Viking raiders. Not bad for a teenage king. He was only 16 at most when he took the throne, and many no doubt had high hopes for his reign. But alas, he was a teenager and they don't make the best decisions. One fine autumn day, the young monarch was out for a ride in Saint-Denis when he suddenly spied a beautiful maiden. He was in love immediately and decided he had to pursue her and win her hand. After all, he was the king and who could stop him? Well, it turned out the answer was gravity. He ordered his horse to give chase. It took off like a bolt and the king's head slammed directly into a door lintel, ending his life on the spot. If ballads were written about him after that, they would definitely be the first entry into the tragic lovesick idiot playlist. There were probably dumber deaths than this next one, but maybe not more embarrassing. Governor Morris was an accomplished man, signing both the Articles of Confederation and the U.S. Constitution. He was one of the lesser-known founding fathers, but one of the more accomplished ones, writing the preamble to the Constitution. But being a scholar doesn't always mean common sense. He was plagued by a nasty urinary tract infection, and rather than seeing a doctor, he decided to treat it himself. His method for this? Using a whalebone as an impromptu stylus and, getting it up in there. Yeah, if you're cringing, you're not alone. The urethra was never designed to accommodate a whalebone, so this DIY medical experiment backfired spectacularly, causing internal bleeding and a gruesome infection. In the pre-antibiotic era, it was a predictably fatal mistake. Making this death even more Darwin-worthy, the first flexible catheter had been invented in 1752, providing an easy way to treat the issues of the urinary tract. The creator of this ingenious device? Ben Franklin, Morris's fellow founding father. Remember, listen to your weird coworker when he talks about his inventions. It just might save your life. Now let's head to the present day, where the dumb deaths are not letting up anytime soon. If there's one surefire recipe ingredient for a dumb death, it's alcohol. Add open water and you've got a guaranteed disaster. Enter the booze cruise. Proof that as a species our survival instincts often take a backseat to shots and bad decisions. But that never stopped a good time before. In 2018, a Massachusetts evening cruise into Boston Harbor turned into a tragic circus act. Aaron DeBella decided to show off his flexibility by performing handstands on the boat's railing. The crew spotted him immediately and warned him to stop before, well, he died. To which he went, "Don't tell me what to do." As soon as the crew turned their backs, DeBella was right back up on the railing testing his luck and gravity. Soon his hands buckled, sending him directly down into the water, and apparently he couldn't swim. The crew held in their "I told you so's" for a minute and then tossed him a life preserver, but DeBella wasn't able to grab onto it and sank to the bottom of Boston Harbor. A search was carried out, but they found his body 3 hours later. So yeah, probably a good idea to have higher railings on the next booze cruise. Curiosity killed the cat, and also this guy. When police arrived at the home of 33-year-old Darren Manship in Leicester, England in 2006, they were greeted with a gruesome sight. The young man had been brutally stabbed to death. They investigated the possibility of a lover's quarrel, or even a simple breaking and entering that turned into a murder. But they couldn't find evidence of either. In fact, they couldn't find any evidence of foul play. The investigation lasted a year, but they finally found the clue in the form of a friend who knew the culprit all too well. There was only one person responsible: Darren himself. The foolish young man had purchased a new jacket, one that was supposed to be pretty sturdy. He wondered aloud to his wife if the jacket was stab-proof, and while he was home alone, he decided to test it on himself by stabbing his jacket with a lock knife. Turned out the answer was a resounding no. And while he called a friend after stabbing himself and later called for an ambulance, it was too late, and he bled out. It's a valuable lesson about the scientific method. You can do any experiment you want, but there are some you really only get to do once. And for determined Darwin Awards winners, anywhere is a playground and a potential death trap. New Carrollton, Maryland, is a busy transit hub located at a junction between Baltimore and Washington, D.C. It funnels countless commuters between stops every day. It's usually a pretty fast and efficient place. So, how did someone wind up dead there in the middle of the night? More shocking, the man appeared to have fallen down the escalator, but his body was lying in front of the up escalator. You would have to work pretty hard to fall to your death on something going the opposite direction, and as it turns out, that's exactly what he did. Investigators checked the security footage and found the man engaged in an epic midnight showdown. He was running up the down escalator, seemingly on some personal eye of the tiger quest. After a grueling effort, he finally conquered his mechanical nemesis, and then he lost his balance and tumbled all the way down to the bottom of the stairs, suffering a fatal head injury. Evidence showed that he may have gotten his clothing stuck in something, which led to his fall, which could have been avoided by not challenging this escalator to a duel. And even the most skilled of craftsmen are often prone to fatal and foolish errors. Howard Miller was a welder, and a very good one at that. The New Zealand craftsman was used to working with flame and chemicals. In September 2018, he was helping a friend weld an exhaust pipe onto a classic car that needed a lot of work. Well, maybe he was in a hurry that day, or maybe he was just ready to retire from welding. But the kit he showed up with that day was not the one any welder would use. It seemed to be cobbled together from experimental components. And there was one big thing that any welder would know to avoid. The two components that made up the welding gas were already mixed. Why is this a death wish waiting to happen? Because acetylene and oxygen together are a fiery disaster waiting to happen. Hot enough to slice metal and explosive enough to obliterate it. With no flow regulator on the tank and his friend frantically warning him about a sketchy setup, Miller decided to charge ahead anyway. His friend wisely bolted out of the shed as Miller started working, and sure enough, an explosion soon happened, taking out Miller, the shed, and the classic car with it. And Mr. Miller earned himself a Darwin Award, thanks to his friend's quick thinking to remove himself from the explosion range. What's more dangerous than welding? How about flying? Something these next winners all have in common. It was 2021, and a man named Solomon was a pilot in training learning how to fly a Cessna 172. These small single-engine planes have a very specific control system, so pilots in training are taught how to fly them and only them. So naturally, after passing a key test, Solomon decided to celebrate by buying a plane, and decided to buy a completely different type of plane, the Piper PA-28140. An odd decision being that he would have to start training all over again to learn the new control system. But he decided, nah, let's not bother with that. This broke all the rules from the start. Student pilots can't fly solo without an approved aircraft, and definitely not at night without instructor clearance. But Solomon ignored his instructor's advice and took off in a plane he had never used before in the dead of night. The flight lasted all of 4 glorious minutes before crashing. Oh, and the plane's transponder wasn't working, so Solomon disappeared completely off the radar. When they found the wreckage, there were 2 bodies inside. 2? Wouldn't that disqualify him for getting his passenger killed? Not exactly. The Darwin Awards ruled the passenger earned an honorable mention for trusting an untrained pilot at night. So this one is totally above board. Yay? The next pilot was much more experienced, but not much smarter. Patrick was an experienced pilot racking up over 10,000 hours of flight time on commercial aircraft until 2015, and that gave him a keen sense of when something was wrong with his aircraft, if maybe not the sense to act on it. During a series of flights over Montana, he noticed that his feet were getting wet, but it wasn't water flooding the cockpit, it was aviation fuel. There was obviously some sort of serious leak in the fuel tank. So upon landing, Patrick did the sensible thing and consulted a mechanic. The mechanic's first advice: don't fly a plane where fuel is leaking until we can get a clear picture of what's causing it. To which Patrick said, "There are deliveries to make." But as a concession to the mechanic, he decided to fly with the electrical system off, meaning he would be flying blind with no instruments. Given that this was a new aircraft that Patrick wasn't entirely familiar with, this wasn't a good idea. But that didn't stop him from taking off from the Missoula International Airport. His flight didn't last long, though, ending in a fiery crash for everyone to see. The crash report indicated that he was likely distracted by the fuel leak and failed to maintain adequate airspeed. To which the mechanic probably responded, "Yeah, that's what happens in a fuel leak." What's worse than crashing a plane? How about not staying in one? It was 2005, and a petty officer in the U.S. Navy wanted to show that he was a big man to his fellow troops. He was currently serving in Iraq, and at this point the main operation had wound down. Troops were mostly serving as peacekeepers and fighting insurgent groups, so they had to find some way to pass the time. One craze was supermanning, which involved tying a harness to the person so they could hang out of the back of an aircraft and then do a Superman pose, making it look like they were flying. Now we know what you're thinking. What could possibly go wrong? It turns out the answer is a lot. The helicopter they were flying on, the MH-53 helicopter, the largest in service, cruised at 138 miles per hour, making it a flying behemoth. With cargo blocking the rear view, not everyone could see what our wannabe Man of Steel was up to. He rigged a belt under his shoulders, dangled himself off the cargo ramp, and predictably lost his grip. His makeshift harness couldn't handle his weight, and down he went. On the bright side, because he was on a mission, his death was classified as in the line of duty. So, silver lining, benefits for the family. Woohoo! Traveling by plane seems to be pretty risky. How about a nice train ride? We've all been there. You make it to the train station with a few minutes to spare. You put your money in the ticket machine, and then the machine eats all your money and gives you nothing. Did you miss the train and try to get your money back? Or do you take your chances that the conductor won't look for your ticket on the train? One German man took a very different approach in 2017, attempting to blast the machine to smithereens at a station in Dortmund. Apparently fed up with losing too many tickets, or maybe just in a creative mood, he knocked back a few drinks for courage and then marched up to the machine with aerosol cans in hand. He emptied several cans of gas into the ticket machine. Then, in a stroke of genius, he lit a flame right next to it. The result was a massive explosion that sent him flying backward and took off the front of the machine. All of that money would have been his for the taking if it wasn't for the fatal head injury and multiple shrapnel wounds. Ironically, his plan actually worked perfectly, and the medical examiner said that he likely would have survived if he had been wearing a helmet and a leather jacket. Oh well, at least he won't have to make the commuter rush anymore. When it comes to doing dangerous stunts, there are definitely some better ones than, well, a volcano. Maybe there should be a new category for Australia Man, because those Aussies certainly seem to love their danger. And it doesn't get more dangerous than fooling around in Cave Garden Sinkhole. This gorgeous spot is located on the flanks of a dormant volcano, and it's been transformed by nature into a gorgeous garden with a waterfall. But a fence surrounds the sinkhole to protect people from themselves. Because, some people wouldn't be able to resist getting themselves an up-close and personal photo. And that is exactly what one clueless man did. Bradley Streeter was a 20-year-old with a mischievous streak, and it took a while to figure out exactly what went wrong. But witnesses confirmed it. Bradley had been doing a handstand on the viewing platform about 100 feet above the entrance to the sinkhole. Predictably, he lost his balance and tumbled off into the abyss. His body was recovered after an exhausting hoist operation. Handstands are risky enough on solid ground, but over a bottomless pit? That's a whole new level of bad judgment. Most of these Darwin Award winners are just unfortunate guys who screwed up, but we have to say this one had it coming. In 2017 in Germany, a 19-year-old man and his date were having a nasty quarrel by the Havel River. One thing turned to another, and soon it devolved into a physical fight. The man shoved his soon-to-be ex-girlfriend into the freezing river, assuming she would drown. What he forgot, however, was that she was an expert swimmer and made a beeline back to shore, likely ready to dish out some well-deserved payback. Realizing his plan was sinking fast, he decided to double down and jumped in after her to finish the job. There was just one problem. She could swim, he couldn't. As he pursued her in the waters that were 35 degrees Fahrenheit, She managed to make it to land where she would be rescued and treated for hypothermia. He was eventually found by police and taken to the hospital where he slipped into a coma, so handcuffs weren't really necessary. Charged with murder while unconscious in a hospital bed, his trial never came as he passed away on February 14th, Valentine's Day fittingly enough. Meanwhile, the woman fully recovered, walking away with nothing but an epic story when the girls are debating who had the worst ex. Sometimes it's just a matter of time before things catch up to someone. Limba, a 68-year-old man in Malaysia, was a spiritual magician who made his living through a unique technique: human steaming. He would sit in a lotus position in a giant stainless steel steamer, essentially taking part in the world's most intense sauna. Making it even more bizarre, he would offer people food like rice and vegetarian steamed buns that were cooked alongside his buns. He claimed it was part of a ritual to cleanse the body and soul of toxins, although it was always kind of a strange sideshow too. Until one day he got a little too steamed. One day the onlookers noticed that the Zen guru wasn't handling his steaming like he always did. He was frantically banging on the inside of the closed steamer, and when they opened it, he had already passed out and hot steam escaped from the wok. He'd already suffered from serious burns, and he passed away from a heart attack after being taken to the hospital. It was the end of a strange sideshow in the little coastal village, and no doubt it put a lot of people off of their steamed buns for a while. If there is one rule that holds true with nature, it is don't mess with the animals. It was 2018, and an Indian man, Prabhu Bhattara, was driving home from a wedding when nature suddenly called, urgently. He pulled over to the side of the road to relieve himself when he noticed something unexpected: a wounded bear at the side of the road. Naturally, he did what anyone totally sensible would do. He tried to get close and snap a selfie. The bizarre scene attracted other drivers who pulled over to snap pictures of him snapping a picture, turning the moment into a roadside spectacle. Everyone was having a great time. Well, except for maybe the bear. It turns out the bear wasn't seriously injured, and it maybe was just sleeping off a bad day. So it quickly lunged forward, pinning the man to the ground and killing him. But eyewitnesses reported it got even crazier, as a stray dog arrived on the scene and immediately attacked the bear. Maybe it was loyal to its role as man's best friend, but the bear had encountered one too many would-be influencers. Forest officials eventually arrived to help, but it was too late for Mr. Bhattara, although they did treat the bear for its injuries. And there are some animals you should give an even wider berth. 2018 was not a good year for those who messed with animals, as Malaysian man Zaim Kosnan was driving down the road when he spotted a 12-foot reticulated python. These snakes are one of the largest and most dangerous on the planet, known for suffocating prey with their powerful constrictions. So naturally, the man thought that'll be worth a lot of money, and he prepared to attack it so he could sell its meat. Against all odds, he managed to subdue the massive snake and transported it home. But the snake was going to delay his arrival. The snake wasn't secured all that well on the motorbike, and it managed to wriggle loose mid-ride, and it wound up wrapping itself around Kosnan's body. This caused Kosnan to veer off the side of the road and crash. When the two were found intertwined the next day, it was determined the crash didn't kill him, the snake did. Alas, the snake didn't escape either. It was still wedged firmly around him when they were found the next morning. When you plan for revenge, best dig 2 graves, one snake-shaped. Now let's head back to America for some good old-fashioned explosives. It was 2009 and 59-year-old Brent was investigating his shed in Utah when he discovered something unexpected: a stash of dynamite. Now, it's not clear if the dynamite was his or related to a rocket testing site nearby, but anyone who studies explosives knows old dynamite is incredibly unstable. It leaks nitroglycerin that can detonate with the slightest disturbance. There are safe disposal methods that anyone who works with explosives knows to follow. But Brent wasn't an explosives expert, he was a Utah man, and he was planning to put on a show. He removed the dynamite from the shed, trucked it over to the field, and proceeded to stand about 40 yards away from it and fire a shotgun. Now, maybe he wanted to see a big light show, and he did, if very briefly. The explosion proceeded to send shrapnel spraying around the field, with one making its way into the man's head and dealing a fatal wound. He was airlifted to the hospital but died on the way. Most people had to ask themselves, what exactly did the man think was going to happen when he shot at dynamite? But no pastime is safe, not even watching the stars. It was 1999 in California, and Scott and his sister Kimberly were looking forward to watching the Perseid meteor shower. Scott had a top telescope ready to watch, despite the fact that you didn't need a telescope to watch this very visible shower. The telescope wasn't giving Scott the best view of the meteor shower, but he quickly blamed another culprit, California's infamous light pollution. The bright glow of urban sprawl was making it nearly impossible to fully appreciate the night sky. That is, unless you turn off the lights. Scott didn't have a great grasp on astronomy, but he turned out to have an even worse one on electricity. He decided to get rid of the light from a local streetlight by opening the base and cutting the power cord, which predictably gave him a massive electric shock, killing him. There was an additional strange detail to this, which came out after the fact. He had been talking about his plans online in a chat room before he died, in one of the very first cases of an online component to the Darwin Awards. This next man ascended to the heights before crashing right back down to earth. 47-year-old Tetsu was an ambitious climber, taking on Japan's most intimidating summit, Mount Fuji. The almost 12,400-foot peak is frequently visited by both religious pilgrims and tourists. It is a notoriously tricky climb. Those looking to ascend the peak will face both bitter cold and dangerous slippery terrain during the safer summer months. But this was a late October climb, and Tetsu had decided to climb the mountain with only a pair of climbing poles and street clothes. But he did have one other thing with him, his smartphone, and he was going to give the whole world a show. He chronicled his daring climb on a local video sharing platform, and the title, "Let's Go to Snowy Mount Fuji," made it sound like a ski vacation. As he climbed on, the videos got less cheerful as he described the intense pain he was in from the cold. But he was determined to continue his live stream, even on the narrow, slippery paths. As he attempted to walk past a jagged rock path, he suddenly tripped, slid down the mountain, and disappeared in a tangle of flailing feet and poles. It was a disturbing end to possibly the only live-streamed mountain climbing fatality. But this workplace fatality defines work smart, not hard. But they weren't very smart either. Japan, the land of the rising sun, takes another spot on our list thanks to this brain trust in the forklift division over at Tanarumono Logistics. After a long day of unloading, the man needed to change a light bulb that was 32 feet above the factory floor. But the forklift would only reach up about 8 feet, so he needed a boost. The solution? They had a whole lot of wooden pallets, so the man and his co-workers proceeded to start stacking the pallets on the forklift, at which point the man would stand on them and then make his way all the way up to the roof. After an extended sequence of stacking pallets and stepping onto each one, the forklift was raised. And almost immediately the rickety stack of pallets collapsed, sending the man crashing to the ground, along with dozens of shards of sharp, freshly shattered wood. No surprise he was killed in the accident, and the light bulb remained unchanged. In 2022, former footballer Murad Lamrabat was enjoying a relaxing family vacation in Majorca, Spain. Lamrabat was known for his strength and speed, and he no doubt felt invincible, so he decided to show off by tombstoning off a cliff in front of his family. For those of you who don't know, this stunt involves leaping off a cliff into the ocean feet first. This is dangerous even in the best of circumstances. You never know what's lurking under the waves. But he wasn't going to let that stop him, as he told his family to film him as he leapt off the cliff. Did we mention the cliff was about 100 feet above the water? Needless to say, he missed completely. Lamrabat leaped off the cliff and made his way down, but he made one crucial error. He didn't jump clear of the sharp sea rocks below. He was killed instantly because while it might be easy to jump down, jumping around 30 feet horizontally is a little more challenging. The one positive of this, maybe a famous person dying in this dramatic fashion, will encourage kids to take less risks because they know they won't end well. And after all, kids are known for their well-reasoned decision-making skills. But of course, age is no guarantee of good sense. Michael Sexton was 58, but he hadn't lost his lust for adventure just yet. The Colorado man was an avid fan of adventure books, and he read one by a known eccentric art dealer named Forrest Fenn. The book, The Thrill of the Chase, claims to be a true narrative of a man who had hidden $2 million of golden artifacts out in the Rocky Mountains. The book was full of clues cleverly hidden in poetry verses, and after poring over the book, Sexton was sure he knew exactly where the treasure was. There was just one problem. people had died searching for it before. Like 350,000 others, Sexton and a friend of his searched and searched but ultimately came up empty. They nearly died from exposure in the process, but Sexton wasn't done. He convinced his friend to head out again, and this time they wandered deeper into the frozen wilderness on foot. By the time they were found, Sexton was dead, and his friend barely survived. No doubt a case of not knowing when to quit. But if you talk to some people, they'll say the real culprit in all of this is Forrest Fenn, and the treasure luring people to their death may not even exist at all. Some people just don't know when to let nature win. There are few less sympathetic figures in the Darwin Awards than poachers. These criminals not only break the law, they do it to hunt some of the rarest, most majestic figures in the wild. So it's always fun when nature wins, like it did in 2019. A poacher snuck into a national park in South Africa on the lookout for rhinos. These massive herbivores are prized for their horns, which are heavily used in folk cures. Taking the horn means killing the rhino. But that didn't deter the amoral hunter. But something else did. He didn't find a rhino, he found an elephant. As the hunter took aim, he startled the massive animal and it promptly trampled over him. He was apparently killed on the spot, but officials found it hard to do a post-mortem investigation. That's because a pack of lions in the national park quickly came upon him and had a feast. It's the circle of life, and also a warning for anyone else trying to poach large animals in Africa. They might be dwindling in numbers thanks to poachers, but if you go up against them, they will win and it won't be pretty. In general, when nature is speaking, it is best to listen. You hear a lot about Florida man, but don't count out New Jersey man. These big brash residents of the Northeast aren't likely to let anything stop them from getting where they're going, even when they probably should stop. That was the case for Anthony G. in 2018. The Wannock man had just woken up to a nor'easter storm dumping snow in the region, and he wanted to get over to his dad's to shovel the driveway. The problem was the streets were a mess and downed wires were everywhere. Workers quickly set up cones safely to block them off and keep the public safe. At least that was the idea. Upon coming across a barricade in Franklin Lakes, Anthony immediately navigated right through it and into the restricted area. It was smooth sailing ahead. Well, it was until his car hit one of the live wires, blasting the car with electricity and immediately turning it into an inferno. By the time the police got there, the car was completely engulfed in flames, and there was no saving the good son. He wouldn't be going back to his job as a New York City electrician. Could somebody else check those connections? And down under, it's important to make sure that you don't wind up down underground. Shopping bag bans have been spreading fast around the world as governments try to cut back on plastic waste. It could save lives, you see. Well, in New South Wales in 2018, it claimed one life. A 58-year-old woman was going shopping, and she did not want to be caught empty-handed in the store. As she was driving, she realized she might have forgotten the bags at home, so she quickly jumped out of the car to check. She just had to look in the trunk to make sure, and it would only take a second. But she had forgotten something much more important. The parking brake wasn't engaged and the car might have been on a slope, and it quickly started rolling back, pinning the woman under it as it slid backwards. She was killed at the scene, and police did not confirm whether there had actually been shopping bags in the trunk or not. Word of advice to anyone living in an area with bag bans: it might just be worth paying the 99 cents for the disposable bag at the store. This next tradesman really should have known better, but experience isn't always wisdom. It was 2017 in Russia, and a welder in Chilina was hard at work constructing highways for the state. Welding is a risky job in the best of times, as those experienced craftsmen are working with extremely hot flames and molten metal. But one day, the welder stumbled upon a discarded artillery howitzer from the military and noticed something unexpected. The barrel was almost exactly the shape that would fit a nearby fire extinguisher. Surely this called for an experiment. What could possibly go wrong? Well, in this case, just about everything. The fire extinguisher didn't just shoot out of the cannon. The force of the firing caused it to immediately explode, sending shrapnel all around the job site, and thanks to the proximity of the unfortunate welder, he was the only casualty, as the shrapnel mortally wounded him. The incident was grimly reported on the local state labor inspection website, and it was firmly established that in the former Soviet Union, fire extinguisher extinguishes you. Let's stick with Russia because some things are identical all around the world. If there is one unalterable rule of human nature, it's that horny young people definitely don't make the best decisions. And that was definitely the case for a pair of young lovers near a Russian lake in 2017. They parked their Russian-made SUV near the water and immediately started making out. They got pretty energetic, in fact rocking back and forth. There was just one problem. Maybe Mr. Chernoff and his lover didn't expect to get so frisky because he had put the car in neutral rather than park, and things were moving fast, inside and out. They might not have even noticed as the car started moving, being otherwise engaged, but sure enough, the SUV was soon rolling toward the lake. By the time they noticed, they were headed underwater and the couple soon drowned. Some might say the fault is the car's, as the force of two people, moving shouldn't be enough to send the car rolling down a hill. But to that, the manufacturers would no doubt say, maybe stop making out long enough to turn off your car. And when you're on social media, be sure to keep your wits about you. There might have been no greater contributor to the Darwin Awards than the onset of social media, which incentivizes young people everywhere to show off to a much larger audience, even if they only show off for a short time. That was the case of one teen in Singapore who wanted to post a crazy stunt to his Snapchat. It was the perfect opportunity. He would leap off a railing and land perfectly on a parapet below. The parapet was located 4 floors above the ground. He would be famous and everyone would love him. Well, he was right about that last bit. The entire idea might have been half-baked. How was he planning to get down after the stunt? But there was one thing he didn't account for. His landing site was made out of flimsy gypsum board, which wasn't intended to hold the weight of a person dropping onto it. It quickly gave way and sent him plummeting to the street below, and it wound up being a last viral moment for the unfortunate Mr. Xiao. And the local coroner urged all young people to be careful when tempted to do something crazy for social media. But no one is safe from dumb decisions, not even celebrities. Roy Halladay was one of the most dominant players in baseball in the 90s, playing for the Toronto Blue Jays and being an 8-time All-Star. But unfortunately, he still had demons, including drug and alcohol abuse and a tendency toward risky behavior. In 2017, he purchased an amphibious sports plane and decided to take it out for a flight. His first few flights went smoothly, and people started hoping that he would be okay, as long as he exercised some caution when flying. Unfortunately, Roy Halladay never took things slow. Before his final flight in November, he took a speedball, a potent cocktail of drugs, and proceeded to fly high as a kite over the Gulf of Mexico. Halladay decided to take things up a notch, performing a series of extremely low-altitude dives that took him within feet of the water. Finally, one of the wings stalled and sent the plane spiraling down into the water, taking the baseball legend with it at only 40 years old. He might have been an ace on the diamond, but not in the air. This next victim might have been kinder than a poacher, but he didn't have more sense. It was 2017 in Plumtree, Zimbabwe, and Moses Ndlovu was a nature lover. Few things excited him more than the chance to see African wildlife, and when he saw 3 elephants in the bush, he was thrilled. There was just one problem. The shrubbery was blocking his perfect photo opportunity, so he gathered 2 of his friends for a plan: startle the elephants and lure them out into the opening so he could get a photo to remember. Did any of the friends say, "Dude, seriously?" We'll never know. But the elephants certainly had something to say. Sure enough, the elephants emerged from the bush, outraged at being disturbed, and they proceeded to charge toward the 3 men. And in true survival of the fittest fashion, Moses found out that his 2 friends were slightly faster runners than him. The elephants caught up to Moses first and then trampled him to death. Hey, at least the animal lover got a very up-close and personal look at his favorite animals before he died. And sometimes, you just have to wonder, what the hell were they thinking? Cody Horn may have been a California resident, but he had the heart of a Florida man. The 28-year-old was last seen riding down State Highway 4, not an unusual sight. But it was what he was riding in that caught everyone's attention. He was sitting in a golf cart, and that golf cart was attached to another car by a garden hose. Not exactly the most sturdy setup. How he convinced the other driver to go along with this unhinged plan is unknown, but it seemed to be going great, at least until it very much wasn't. A garden hose is not meant to hold a golf cart, especially not a fast-moving one, and soon enough the cart was drifting and swaying in traffic. It drifted out of its lane and directly into the path of a Ford truck, which hit Horn's golf cart head-on, ejecting him from the vehicle and killing him. The police were now hot on the trail of Horn's ill-advised accomplice, who might be on the hook for manslaughter, but most people simply viewed it as a cautionary tale to, not ride tethered in a golf cart on the highway. And it's usually men who are the grand prize winners, but sometimes it's ladies' night. In the Mexican state of Chihuahua, a pair of young women were excited for a day at the races. The event was held on a track near a local airfield, which meant guests could see planes taking off and landing all day. It was an impressive sight and a perfect opportunity for a selfie for the two besties. They could have waited for a plane to be landing nearby and quickly took a picture with it in the background. But then, they wouldn't be in the Darwin Awards. Instead, they snuck onto the airfield itself and they sought out the highest vantage point for a photo. There weren't many options, as airports are built on flat land. So they found a flatbed truck and they climbed to the top without permission. They were now at the highest point in the airfield and they spent plenty of time there taking photos, at least until a low-flying plane came down and plowed directly into them, killing them instantly. The authorities blamed the roar of the crowd for drowning out the plane, but also, don't take selfies on airfields. The military is supposed to be the epitome of discipline, but no one told these pilots. It was the conclusion of a week-long naval event that included plenty of training in low-altitude flying techniques, and a pair of pilots immediately decided to put it to work. They were flying back home and trading off at the controls, but they were also using a risky technique called flat hatting, where they would fly at a low altitude at high speeds. At times, they would fly as low as 210 feet above ground level, less than half of the required clearance level. But the instructing pilot, Lieutenant Ruth, wanted this to be a learning experience, and it would be for everyone else. The younger pilot, Lieutenant Birch, was showing good technique until Ruth deviated from the flight path, began a descending turn, and then he handed the plane back over to his protege so he could make a hard right turn. Well, sure enough, the pilot didn't have enough time to correct for how low and slow the plane was. It stalled out. The pilots didn't have time to eject and both joined the Darwin Awards Club. While Ruth holds the most responsibility as the commanding officer, reports show both pilots were displaying extremely reckless behavior throughout the flight. Kids always do dumb things to escape being grounded. Wait, he's how old? In France, a 47-year-old man was facing an embarrassing situation, being locked in his bedroom by his mom. He still lived with his mother and he was a habitual alcoholic. Well, mom knows best, so she decided to trap him in his room to make him go cold turkey. Naturally, this wouldn't do for this middle-aged good-time guy, so he began plotting his great escape. He opened the window and saw a cable that would work just fine for shimming his way down to the street from 9 stories up. Hey, no one ever said alcoholics made great decisions. Climbing down 9 stories with no safety gear would require an incredible level of grip and concentration, which it's unlikely our hapless hero had. But it would be a moot point because he had chosen to climb down a thin Ethernet cable, which was definitely not equipped to carry the weight of a grown man. It soon gave way, and he plunged to a fatal finish below. Sorry, Mom, you tried. But he may have had slightly better judgment than these 3 drunks. Eaton, Ohio might be a fairly sleepy town, but these 3 guys were out to live it up in 1991. They spent the July 4th holiday drinking when they suddenly got the munchies. Being good old boys, they didn't want nachos or mozzarella sticks. They wanted meat. Pork chops in particular, but they took the long way around to getting those pork chops. They drove to a farm, and they proceeded to abscond with a hog. Now they just needed to get it back home, butcher it, and then fry up those delicious chops. Now the pig, well, he wasn't happy with this chain of events. The hog struggled, collapsing a section of fence and allowing the other pigs to escape. This alerted the owner, who fired a shotgun into the air while the drunks escaped with the hog, which they then loaded onto the pickup truck. But on the road home, as they were speeding 90 miles per hour without seatbelts, the hog started going nuts, and it was ejected from the vehicle. The drunks swerved off the road, and all 3 men were fatally thrown from the car. But there was one bit of good news. The pig lived. We're all rooting for you, Porky. Well, sometimes all it takes is one moment of distraction at the worst possible moment. Ken Charles Barger was a good old boy in North Carolina. He loved his guns, and he liked to keep one as close as possible to him, even sleeping with it by his side. Maybe he thought it was a good way to be safe, just in case an intruder broke in. But in December 1992, he proved to be his own worst enemy. He was in a deep sleep when suddenly the phone rang. Jolted out of his dreams, he groggily reached for what he thought was his phone, only to grab his gun and accidentally pull the trigger, fatally wounding himself. That was one costly late-night call. It's good to grab breakfast early, but not this early. The Pancake Pantry in Nashville is one of the city's most popular spots, not only serving up amazing pancakes, but serving them to top names in the country music scene. It's common for guests to wait outside for hours to get a seat, but one unfortunate visitor decided to cut the line in the worst possible way. An employee who knew how much money the Pancake House was making decided to rob it, and he had the perfect way in. He would climb onto the roof, sneak into the exhaust chute, and drop into the restaurant from inside of the kitchen. Seemed like a good plan in theory, but the execution was a different story. First, he started to get his clothing snagged on the vent, so he took them off and proceeded to shimmy into the exhaust vent completely naked. Things didn't get any better. Pretty soon he got stuck, and at some point during the night he fatally suffocated. How was he discovered? His legs were hanging out of the exhaust vent, only feet above the grill. No doubt delaying the morning pancake rush. Might be for the best. That definitely was not sanitary. And even men of God are not safe from bad judgment calls. Bishop Pike was used to taking on sacred cows. The eccentric, chain-smoking Bishop of California had been going up against the church orthodoxy, advocating for women, the poor, and the LGBT community. He even directly questioned Episcopal Church doctrine, arguing that hell might not exist. One might think the church might want to get rid of him, but the bishop would self-depose in 1969. He and his wife traveled to Israel to trace the footsteps of Jesus, and they wanted it to be as authentic as possible. But the bishop was not cut out for desert life. Their journey took them deep into the desert, where the roads were poor and the weather was scorching hot. They didn't bring enough to drink, so they headed off the beaten path, and they eventually got stuck in a rut on an isolated side road. So they decided to walk, and they wound up going in the wrong direction. He eventually collapsed, and his much younger wife soldiered on to find help. It took 5 days to find the body of the bishop, who had tried to scale a canyon wall, slipped, and plummeted 60 feet to his death. No doubt feeling close to God as he went. To which God might say, "Why didn't you take more than 2 cans of Coke? If you teach a man to fish, he'll eat for life, unless he does this." The fishing waters off Zambia are rich, and for 28-year-old Harris Simwaba, he was out to get some food. But he came across a fish that didn't seem to want to go down so easily. The small fish had come out of the Chungu River, and it was putting up a fight, so Harris stuck it into his mouth to bite its head off. And the fish immediately slid down his throat, becoming wedged in his esophagus. He tried to hook it with a stick and pull it back out, but it pushed further down and cut off what little air supply he had left. He was found the next day by villagers who pulled the stick out of his mouth, and the unfortunate fish that came with it. Now let's turn back the clock to jolly old England. The year was 1878, and old Bill Paget was a colorful man. He had previously appeared before a judge for attempting to kill another man, but he managed to get an acquittal. But by 1887, he had moved to the United States, and he was involved in the settlement of a new town. The local area was populated with bears, and old Bill and his brother James were in charge of scaring them off. They decided to build a rudimentary bear trap called a deadfall, designed to make a pointed log fall and hit the animal when it gets caught. And Bill proved it effective, in the worst way possible. It was morning and the trap hadn't been disturbed yet. Paget decided to make sure that it had been set properly, and he wandered into the trap, setting it off and pinning him under the log. He lasted several hours before others woke up and they noticed him trapped there. They freed him, and he immediately asked for a drink of water, and then immediately died after finishing it. No word on if any bears were seen breathing a sigh of relief in the vicinity. The next brain trust decided to get his car squeaky clean, and himself as well. It was 2022, and Rene Tacte was on a trip to Escondido, California from Las Vegas. He decided to visit a car wash late at night before heading back, and headed into the powerful cleaning area. For those who haven't visited a car wash, these places mean business. They will power wash your car with hoses, lather it up with soap, and then dry it out with what feels like the concentrated energy of the sun. If you accidentally leave your window open when you drive through, your car's in for a bad time. So what would possess this Las Vegas man to get out of the car mid-wash? No one knows, but while the car was still in gear, the 56-year-old man stepped outside. But it wasn't the powerful blasts of the car wash that killed him. His car rolled forward and pinned him under it. The dead man wasn't discovered until the next person rolled through the car wash, and we think that's going to take a little more to clean up than the usual power washing. Next, this good time gang didn't know when to call it quits. The year was 1969, and it was hurricane season along the Mississippi Gulf Coast. Hurricane Camille was bearing down, and the government was pulling out all the stops. Emergency teams were warning everyone to evacuate, and if they couldn't leave, to find somewhere safe and shielded from the hurricane. And to this, a group of friends decided, we're here for a good time, not a long time. They not only didn't evacuate, they decided to throw a massive hurricane party and invite everyone that they knew to see the massive storm up close. And if that wasn't bad enough, they made every other bad choice that they could along the way. The party was being held in a second-story apartment facing the ocean. The hosts insisted the concrete foundation would keep them safe, but no one accounted for just how big the waves would get. A massive 24-foot swell slammed directly into the apartment, destroying the whole building and ripping open the walls, sweeping the unfortunate partygoers out to sea. In total, a full 20 of the 143 fatalities from the storm came from this one party, and some of the survivors were swept away miles along the coast. It's rare that one Darwin Award can claim 20 different winners, but the hurricane party in 1969 might just be the king of Darwins. Lester C. Harvey was a man's man, an avid outdoorsman from Virginia who lived for the hunt. But in 2024, that passion would be the death of him. Out on a hunt with his friends, they spotted a bear and gave chase. It was bear season and they were ready for their prize, but this bear was smarter than your average, well, you know what we mean. Instead of running blindly, it outsmarted them, clambering up a nearby tree, safely out of range. So naturally, they chalked it up to a loss and they went about their day. Or they would have if they weren't from Virginia. The men tried to prod the bear out of the tree, but they failed. And as they retreated, one of the men aimed his gun and proceeded to shoot the bear right out of the tree. His bullet hit the target, and the bear tumbled down onto the ground right on top of the unfortunate Lester. Bears are pretty big animals, so this was a critical blow. And despite frantic first aid attempts, Lester died of his injuries at a nearby hospital. Of course, he wasn't the only death related to this incident. That bear is no doubt still being toasted at the local honeypots. And not even prominent citizens are safe from embarrassing ends. Number 25. Johnny Turner was an American attorney who assembled quite the career over his almost 77 years of life, serving as an Army medic and operating a successful private practice. He even tried to kickstart a political career, serving in the Kentucky House of Representatives in the late 90s. Everyone likes a comeback story, and Turner was re-elected to the Kentucky Senate in November 2021. It was a big victory for him, but the Kentucky power broker wouldn't even see the end of his first term in office. And it wouldn't be the voters that did him in either. Turner was riding a lawnmower at his home in Harlan when he took a wrong turn and proceeded to drive it directly into the swimming pool. This would have been an embarrassing incident, except that the pool was empty at the time, so instead of a wet pair of clothes and a ruined mower, Turner suffered fatal injuries. He was eulogized by local politicians, including national figures like Senator Mitch McConnell, as a dedicated public servant. However, no one had anything to say about his driving skills. And for these Indian tech powerhouses, they flew a little too close to the sun. Number 24. Sanjay Shah had made it big. His tech company Vistex was based in Illinois and was gaining popularity across the ocean. Now he and his company president Raju Dadla were in Hyderabad to celebrate their company's success in front of hundreds of guests and employees. And they wanted to make an entrance in a big way. Shah and Dadla were set to make a dramatic entrance, being lowered onto the main stage in an iron cage descending from a specially built wooden platform. It was going to be spectacular. They would appear as if sent from the heavens, ready to dazzle the crowd. And then things went horribly wrong. As the gentle descent began, a chain broke. The metal cage fell 15 feet to the stage below in front of horrified onlookers. Shah died at the hospital from injuries to his leg and hand, while Dadla suffered a critical head injury that left him in a coma. He died several months later. Both men were eulogized as pillars of the Indian tech scene and praised as good bosses, but it was no doubt a warning to future tech executives to keep a hands-on approach, but maybe don't do your own stunts. This next victim is the definition of too much of a good thing. Number 23. The small town of Romano di Lombardia was known for its beautiful landscapes and its bountiful cheeses. Like its namesake, it did a brisk business in selling massive wheels of Grana Padano cheese, a Parmesan-style cheese known for its hard rind. These cheeses need to ripen in storage for a long time, and someone has to check on them. And one day in 2023, that job fell to Giacomo Ciapparini, a 74-year-old cheese expert who was responsible for inspecting the cheese. Lots and lots of cheese. And those cheeses weighed a lot. He worked in a warehouse that stored upwards of 15,000 wheels of cheese on an intricate collection of metal shelves that stood up to 32 feet high. As he was inspecting the shelves, one of them collapsed, creating a domino effect that sent hundreds of wheels tumbling down on the old man. When the authorities arrived, they had to bring in extra help just to move all the cheeses and shelves before finally discovering the unfortunate Mr. Ciapparini. The cheese inspector made a fate rarer than a perfectly aged Parmesan: death by formaggio. Nature is brutal, and sometimes it's petty. Number 22. Let's head back to India, where elephants are a part of everyday life. The massive beasts are usually peaceful, but they can be startled, and when they are, they can cause a lot of damage. That's what happened to Maya Murmu, who was collecting water in a rural area of India. She had the misfortune of encountering a herd of elephants and attempted to flee, but one of the elephants ran toward her and trampled her. She was killed instantly, and her family transported her body back to home for burial. And that is where things get weird, because an elephant never forgets. As the funeral proceedings went on, a herd of elephants burst from the forest and they proceeded to charge toward the funeral. The villagers all fled, but they had to leave Murmu's body behind. One of the elephants proceeded to knock the body out of the casket and toss it into the air. Meanwhile, some of the elephants charged toward the dead woman's home and destroyed it, while the rest of the herd damaged other homes. Just a terrible coincidence, or did one of those elephants remember something about the unfortunate Miss Murmu? An animal also spelled the end for this next man, but not a living one. Number 21. Dinosaurs are definitely the most famous animals none of us have ever seen. People love them, and they play starring roles in movies, and in theme parks, and even in public art, like in Spain, where Barcelona plays host to a huge papier-mâché sculpture of a stegosaurus. People come regularly to the site to admire the dino and take pictures, at least until a man and his son noticed something was off about the statue one day. There was something inside of it, and what the police discovered was shocking. It was a body inside of the dinosaur's leg. How did the unfortunate man get there? Well, he certainly wasn't eaten by it. Stegosaurus are herbivores, and they're extinct. But they found a clue buried even deeper within the sculpture. It was the man's cell phone. Police believe he accidentally dropped his phone while trying to get a picture of the dinosaur and entered the statue head first and then fell. Unable to get any traction and climb out, he was trapped and is believed to have died soon after, before being undetected inside the structure for several days. For this lawman, the long arm of the law was no match for a bird. Number 20. It was 2020 in the Philippines, and Lieutenant Christian Bullock was on patrol. There had been reports of illegal cockfighting rings in the area. Not only was this animal cruelty, this was during the COVID-19 pandemic, when gathering to watch chickens kill each other was strictly prohibited. Bullock led his men to the site of the fight, breached the door, and found several men and chickens armed with gaffs, or sharp blades on their legs that the chickens use for fighting. Undeterred, he quickly grabbed one of the chickens, only to fall victim to the bird's deadly weapon. The gaff sliced into his femoral artery and he began bleeding profusely. While his men tried their best to stem the bleeding, he was dead on arrival at the nearby hospital. In the end, the other officer shut down the fighting ring, arrested 3 people, and confiscated their money. It was a victory for the fight against spreading the plague and animal cruelty, although it came at a high price. One that could have been avoided if Officer Bullock wasn't so determined to round up all the chickens. After all, they're not the ones being arrested. This next mother probably should have checked where she was sticking her head. Number 19. Raising kids is tough. When you have a baby or a toddler, countless things can go wrong at any moment, including some you probably don't think are possible. That was the case for Belarus mom Yulia Sharko, who was celebrating her 21st birthday. She had just driven home and needed to get her 2-year-old daughter settled. She wanted to speed the process up, so rather than open the car door, she attempted to lift the little girl through the window, which was only half open. She just needed to reach in and get the little one out of her car seat, and that was when the girl accidentally hit the window button. Sharko's car had automatic windows, and there wasn't all that much room between the window and the roof when she stuck her head in. The window quickly rose, trapping the young mother's neck between the window and the frame, cutting off airflow to her brain. Her husband eventually found her, but by then she was unconscious and had suffered critical brain injuries. She never regained consciousness and died 8 days later in the hospital. If you think a kid can't reach something, they probably can. For this next guy, the sky was the limit, literally. Number 18. Julian Knott was the first name in ballooning. The British daredevil loved taking to the sky in hot air balloons and even developed balloons for space agencies to explore far-flung destinations like the moon of Titan. He was known for his record-setting achievements like crossing the Sahara in 1972 and the Alps only a year later. By his 70s, he had a whopping 96 British and 79 world ballooning records, and he wasn't done yet. In 2019, he was piloting an experimental pressurized high-altitude balloon in California. It was one of his most dangerous missions yet, but it wasn't the flight that got him. He landed the flight successfully, his gondola coming to a rest near a hill. But before he could even unbuckle his harness, disaster struck. The gondola suddenly transformed into an unstoppable sled, rocketing down the rocky slope. What followed was a tragic crash landing. The elderly balloonist at 75 years old didn't stand a chance. But the many guests at his funeral, in between talking up his history-making accomplishments, no doubt noted the irony that in the end it was the ground that got him, not the sky. Knott chased death his whole life, but this man just wanted to relax. Number 17. It was one of the strangest mysteries to ever shake up the quiet Scottish Highlands town of Invergarry. A bizarre death, a grand old-fashioned hotel, and a murder weapon no one saw coming. At the luxurious Glengarry Castle Hotel, American tourist Patrick McGuire was found dead, his body wedged tightly between a massive metal bench and the wall, causing him to asphyxiate. Who could have done this, and why would they choose to use a bench as a murder weapon? Well, it turns out the culprit was gravity. The unfortunate Mr. McGuire headed outside to take photos and have a cigarette break, and he never came back. An investigation showed that the ground under the bench was unstable, and the man sitting down caused it to tip over, resulting in a head injury and leaving him unable to struggle free before his oxygen was cut off. The hotel had previously been warned that the cast iron benches posed a safety risk, but they didn't remove them, resulting in a hefty fine to the hotel once the investigation was concluded. The culprit in this next mystery? Too much of a good thing. Number 16. When a 54-year-old construction worker passed away due to a heart ailment in 2019, it didn't look like a particularly suspicious death, but after the autopsy, his blood work showed something bizarre: an incredibly high level of glyceric acid. Not only is that a mouthful, but the chemical can lower potassium in the blood and reduce the level of electrolytes, which can alter the heart rhythm and make a cardiac event much more likely. The prime suspect was America's most hated candy. Black licorice is definitely the least favorite girl at the Halloween candy dance, but it's not just decisive, it has a high level of this acid, and the man had a licorice addiction. In fact, he had recently switched from red Twizzlers to traditional black licorice, which wouldn't be a problem if the man wasn't eating 2 bags of licorice a day for 3 weeks. This was a wildly atypical amount, and he became one of the only people ever to die of too much candy. Maybe Mom had a point. This next man lived the dream, well, for a very short time. Number 15. Richard Russell was a 28-year-old worker at Seattle-Tacoma International Airport, serving as a ground service agent. Depressed and not feeling like his life was going anywhere, Russell apparently admired the high-flying pilots who came in and out of the airport every day. He dreamed of being just like them, and one day in 2018 he decided to make it a reality. He snuck into the cockpit of an Alaskan Airlines branded Horizon Air Bombardier, and he took it to the skies. He was finally living the dream. There was just one problem. Richard Russell had never flown a plane before. Jets were scrambled to take down the plane in what was originally assumed to be a hijacking, but after making contact with Russell, it became clear he didn't want to hurt anyone. He soared over Seattle, skimming past Mount Rainier and the Olympic Mountains, marveling at the view that most only dream of. Over the radio, he chatted casually, bringing up an orca that had recently made headlines, as if he were on a joyride rather than a stolen flight. Then, in an audacious move, he proceeded to do a barrel roll in the air before crashing his plane on a lightly populated island. He was the only person killed. It was a bizarre series of events and as much of a failure on the part of airport security as the unhinged pilot himself. This was probably the most unusual case of death by dessert anyone had ever seen. Number 14. Because ice cream wasn't exciting enough anymore, one of the hottest desserts of the early 2000s was Dippin' Dots. These tiny balls of ice cream were made with dry ice. They provided a unique sensation in the mouth and some powerfully concentrated flavors, but someone had to keep the machines running. In Seattle, one man took on the job, maintaining several at once, hauling them from place to place. It was routine work, until the day his wife borrowed the truck to drive the man's elderly mother home. The only problem was, maybe the maintenance wasn't up to scratch. The truck was packed with dry ice that was used to chill the ice cream, and it was leaking, with the vapors being packed with carbon dioxide. The car was flooded with a non-breathable gas, and it was later found at the side of the road with the 2 women unconscious. 77-year-old Hildegard Whiting was declared dead at the scene, and her daughter-in-law was taken to the hospital in critical condition. And all across the country, people reading the news went, maybe I'll stick with Rocky Road. This next man was tempting fate, but fate got him in a completely different way. Number 13. Peter Korkmaz wasn't a man who scared easily. He was one of few people willing to testify against Dutch criminal mastermind Willem Holleder, and he was seen as a key to bringing down the entire organization. Now, this could normally get someone fitted for cement shoes, or cement clogs in this case, but Korkmaz was undeterred. He was out and about going fishing when his fishing line hooked into an electric pole instead of a fat bass, and it pierced the protective coating, sending an electric surge through the line and fatally shocking Korkmaz. The man was killed instantly, dealing a blow to the trial. Holleder issued a statement regretting the man's death and no doubt denying any involvement. This next man proved it doesn't take a lot to lose it all. Number 12. Let's head down to Brazil, where Gildo Mustache Santos was the kind of guy who knew how to have a good time. He'd been drinking heavily one night, but fortunately he didn't drive under the influence. Instead, he staggered back to the gas station where he worked as a cashier, and he came up with a bizarre idea to create a miniature ocean in the store. Gildo was a well-liked, eccentric man, and he no doubt thought that this would be a fun way to liven up the store for the customers the next day. Hey, it made sense when he was drunk. Unfortunately, it didn't get too far before things went haywire. When people came into the store the next day, they found Santos on the floor with his head inside a gallon of water. It took a while for the police to figure out exactly what went wrong, but the theory is that while he was assembling the pool filled with water, he simply slumped over. He fell face first into the water and he was too drunk to get himself out. And so Mr. Santos became the one and only visitor to Playa del gas station. And sadly, he didn't get to bring any new guests to his institution unless you count the police and the medical examiners. In terms of unusual ways to drown, though, this woman might just take the cake. Number 11. Elizabeth Isherwood was a hard-working woman who worked as a care worker, and she was no doubt looking forward to a vacation. She rented a villa in Western Wales and then disappeared under mysterious circumstances. When the resort investigated, they ultimately cracked open a large cupboard, and they found Mrs. Isherwood inside completely naked. And even more bizarrely, the cupboard was filled with water. It looked like a case of foul play, but how would a murder like this even happen? Well, it turns out the truth is stranger than fiction. The unfortunate Miss Isherwood's death was a complete accident. It's believed that she had finished a shower, walked back into her room in the dark, and accidentally stepped into the airing cupboard. The door slammed shut and locked behind her. When she tried to claw her way out the back, she accidentally damaged a water pipe and caused water to flood the cupboard, soaking her and leading to her death from hypothermia. Was the villa a safety hazard? We're betting no one thought of an escape hatch in a cupboard. This next death went viral, and not just because its victim was a celebrity. Number 10. Rebecca Berger was rising fast, and the 33-year-old French fitness blogger had over 154,000 followers on Instagram in 2017. She was known for her recipes, her health advice, and her colorful personality. But that same year, she died under mysterious circumstances, at least at first. It turned out that the culprit was a common household appliance, one that had seriously injured people before: a whipped cream dispenser. These harmless-looking devices use gas capsules to siphon the cream. However, if there's too much pressure, the cap can explode, and it can become a powerful projectile. In the past, they've broken ribs and noses, causing hospital visits, but this time the cap was aimed directly for Rebecca Berger's chest, causing a massive heart attack. To which the company responded with, "Well, yeah, we know our whipped cream dispensers could hurt someone, but kill them?" They say when you seek revenge, dig 2 graves. Literally in this case. Number 9. At the Luzerne County Correctional Facility in Pennsylvania, rookie corrections officer Christopher Moles was a well-regarded man, and inmate Timothy D. Gilliam was not. He was known as a troublemaker around the prison, and one day in 2016 he and Moles exchanged words by the 5th-floor elevator. Gilliam proceeded to attack Moles, tackling the guard into the elevator door, and that's when things went very wrong. The elevator door, meant to hold steady, suddenly gave way. In an instant, Moles and Gilliam were left dangling over the gaping elevator shaft. Nothing but a sheer drop beneath them. A fellow guard fought desperately to pull them to safety, but it was too late. Both men plunged to the abyss. Moles was mourned as a hero who died in the line of duty, and Gilliam as someone who decided to pick a fight over a 50-foot drop. Fishing is a dangerous activity, but some catches are riskier than others. Number 8. Anyone who loves the sea knows that some of its creatures can be hazardous. After all, a stingray took out the beloved wildlife expert Steve Irwin. But that didn't stop Hawaii man Randy Lanes, who spotted a massive swordfish off the Big Island. He fired a spear at the massive sharp-billed fish, which fought back. Never a man to back down, Lanes jumped off the boat to wrangle it. The swordfish proceeded to stab Lanes in the chest, causing a fatal wound. Authorities mourned the beloved fishing boat captain, but warned that this was fairly predictable. After all, the pointy end of the swordfish is sharp enough that it sometimes even pierces fishing canoes. And not even the most powerful people in the world are safe, if people around them aren't careful. Number 7. Christopher de Margerie was a powerful French businessman, the chairman and the CEO of oil company Total SA. His desire to expand the company's holdings brought him to Moscow, where he hoped to cut a deal with the country's most powerful oligarchs and get the approval of its political power brokers. It seemed to be a successful meeting with Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev when he and several crew members boarded a small plane. But that plane would not get home. It wouldn't even leave the ground. As they were taking off, a snowplow broke through the protected area and slammed directly into the plane, causing a crash and killing everyone on board. French authorities opened their own investigation into the mysterious death, but most people believed the snowplow driver was simply drunk or driving irresponsibly. Still, in Russia, no one knows for sure. The country has a long history of people who aroused the ire of the government dying under mysterious circumstances. This next case showed that playground antics can go too far. Number 6. Most people have either gotten a wedgie or given one, or at least watched it on TV. The classic bullying technique sounds funny. It involves pulling the underwear so far up your back that it leaves it wedged up there. And of course, once you leave school, it's no longer a prank, it's called assault. And one man learned that the hard way. Bradley Davis found himself in a heated argument with his stepfather, Denver Lee St. Clair. After St. Clair made a comment about Davis's mother, furious, Davis decided to retaliate in the most bizarre way imaginable. He grabbed the older man's waistband and yanked hard, pulling his underwear up over his head in what can only be described as an atomic wedgie gone horribly wrong. It's the kind of move you would expect to see in a cartoon, but in reality it turned deadly. The force of the wedgie left ligature marks on Denver Lee St. Clair's neck along with blunt force trauma. Worse yet, it caused asphyxiation, leading to his death. Now that's certainly a costly price to pay for talking ill about someone's mom, and the authorities agreed. Davis was arrested, convicted of manslaughter, and sentenced to 30 years behind bars. Yet another reason not to do everything you see on TV. Safety first. But this woman took it way too far. Number 5. When pandemics hit, most people take extreme measures, even more than hoarding toilet paper. In Taiwan in 2004, the pandemic of the moment was SARS, a deadly respiratory virus. While most people were wearing masks and avoiding large groups, one woman had a different idea, soaking herself in a bath of ethanol for 12 hours. There was no evidence that bathing in this alcohol could deter disease, but she didn't die of SARS, that's for sure. The alcohol soaked through her skin, causing a fatal level of intoxication, and she was found dead in the bathtub the next day. But at least she was spared the world's worst hangover. From here on out, it's all about the animals. Number 4. Swans are known for being one of the most aggressive birds out there, targeting humans who encroach on their territory, which made it all the odder that a man named Anthony Hensley worked for a company that used swans and dogs to chase geese away from local properties. One day he was kayaking in a pond near Chicago, wrangling up the swans, when one of them became enraged and swam at him. It quickly attacked the hapless man, knocking him out of his kayak and leaving him struggling in the water. And that is where things get weird. For one thing, Hensley didn't seem to be able to swim well, and he wasn't wearing a life vest, an odd choice for a man who worked with water-based birds for a living. And what's more, the swan seemed to have a grudge against him because it kept coming back to attack him again and again, even as he was struggling in the water. Hensley became exhausted and was unable to stay afloat any longer. By the time rescuers reached him, it was too late. They pulled him from the water, but despite their best efforts, he was pronounced dead at the hospital. But even the smallest animals can claim lives under the right circumstances. Number 3. Captain Dan Salas wasn't just a deckhand. He was the star of the show. For years, the 54-year-old veteran fisherman entertained school children aboard a charter boat, turning routine cruises into unforgettable adventures. He was known for his wild antics, his larger-than-life personality, and his willingness to push the limits for a laugh. And on one fateful day in 2009, he took things a step further. He took a small bait fish and he popped it into his mouth, swallowing it whole. There was just one problem. It lodged in his throat and he was unable to dislodge it, leaving him struggling for breath in front of dozens of horrified children. He soon passed out and died, providing a valuable and horrifying lesson to all those kids on his boat. But no animal where it shouldn't be caused more damage than this one. Number 2. The year was 2010, and a mid-sized plane carrying 21 people was finishing its flight across the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Suddenly, it lost altitude and crashed to the ground, hitting a house about a half-mile away from the runway that it was aiming for. 19 of the 21 people on board were killed on the spot, while one of the survivors died at the hospital. There was only one person around to tell the story of what happened on the plane, and what they revealed turned this into one of the most bizarre plane crash stories in history. While initial investigations looked into the possibility of fuel exhaustion, it was determined that the plane had plenty left in the tank. The survivor later reported that one of the passengers had brought a duffel bag on board, and that contained a live crocodile. The reptile escaped during the flight, causing a panic, and sent all the passengers running toward the cockpit. This caused the weight in the plane to shift dramatically, altering its trajectory and sending it plummeting to the ground. Oh, and there was one more survivor. The crocodile reportedly crawled from the wreckage and disappeared into the wild. But in terms of shocking deaths caused by animals, nothing can top this one. Number 1. The year was 1988 in Buenos Aires, Argentina, and Kachi the poodle was about to meet a tragic end. The little dog was playing on the balcony of its home when it suddenly fell from the railing, plunging 13 floors to its death. But Kachi wasn't the only victim. It happened to land directly on the head of 75-year-old Marta Espina, who was walking along the street and was fatally hit by the fast-falling fuzzball. But the carnage caused by the pooch was just the beginning. As Edith Solo was attracted by the crowd rushing over to see the carnage, she was hit by a bus and killed. The carnage caused an older man to be overcome with stress, and he immediately had a fatal heart attack. And that probably makes Kachi the poodle with the highest kill count in the history of humanity. When common sense takes a vacation, the results can be fatal and hilarious. From fireworks turning someone into a human candle to the guy who decided to test a bulletproof vest the hard way. And let's not forget the Casanova who used glue to get busy. Is it a super controversial take to say that you probably shouldn't treat guns like toys? That's a lesson that Daniel Wright from Gary, Indiana learned the hard way back in 2005. Our story begins where a lot of stupid things have happened, outside of a liquor store. Daniel and some buddies were getting lit when he slid on his new bulletproof vest, eager to show his friends just how effective it was. So effective that he gave one of his friends a 20-gauge shotgun and told them blast him with it at point-blank range. What? It's a totally chill, normal thing for friends to shoot each other outside of a liquor store. Anyway, Daniel was lethally wounded when the blast tore through his jacket. It turned out that Mr. Wright, in his infinite wisdom, had bought a flak jacket designed for surviving fragments of high explosives and not a bulletproof vest. He was dead within 2 hours. Daniel's death was so phenomenally dumb that his friends panicked and they claimed a mystery gunman had assassinated him, a lie that landed them in legal hot water, all because Daniel bought the wrong vest. And speaking of stuff that wouldn't stop bullets, let's talk about MacBooks. Extremely useful in an office, not so useful on a battlefield. As one unfortunate Russian soldier on the battlefields of Irpin, Ukraine discovered firsthand back in 2022. Being a soldier doesn't pay all that well, but if you are sleazy enough, you can have great perks, like getting to rob and pillage the homes of people you're invading. This was something that this unnamed Russian soldier realized when he happened upon a MacBook, but he didn't have anywhere to carry it. So he took the initiative to remove one of the ballistic plates of the armor on his chest and he slid the MacBook into the pocket instead. That probably felt like a bargain, all those rubles saved on a brand new computer, right up until a Ukrainian bullet tore through the laptop and the thief behind it. But Ukrainians often get it as good as they give it with bizarre Darwin Award deaths. This was the case with a chemistry student back in 2009 who attended the Kyiv Polytechnic Institute and had a strange habit. He compulsively chewed gum. But that's not all. He loved to dip that gum in citric acid for a little bit of a flavor boost. That's a pretty weird thing to develop a taste for, but when you're a chemistry student around a variety of dangerous chemicals, it becomes extremely weird. And during one extremely unfortunate accident, that student, identified only by his first name, Vladimir, mistook some unknown explosive compound for citric acid and decided to give his gum a little zing. People around the college heard an explosion and they ran in to check. They found Vlad with the bottom half of his face blown off, and he didn't survive for long after that. Maybe don't dip your gum into weird chemicals. Not sure who needs to hear that, but we guess it's a message we could all take home with us. But let's not leave the world of dumb deaths in Europe just yet. You ask anybody in Europe and they'll tell you that nothing sucks more than a Brit on vacation. They're rude, they're inconsiderate, and they expect every restaurant to serve fish and chips. One of these so-called Brits abroad was David Monk back in 2008, who was on a skiing vacation in the Italian Alps. After he and some buddies got loaded on that primo Italian booze, they headed up to the ski slope to have a little after-hours fun. But there was only one problem. They didn't have any skiing gear. But before they could go off-piste to piste off, Monk had a genius idea. What if he removed one of the rubber mats from the ski barriers so they could slalom down the slope with that? And you could really pick up some speed on that thing, as Monk found out the hard way when he skidded right into the barrier that he had just removed the mat from, suffering multiple injuries leading to his death. Truly specialist stuff. Though it is not even close to the craziness of what's coming up next. You'll find that a lot of people get killed when they try to do cool daredevil stuff in front of their friends. 23-year-old Tyler Pinkley met an untimely end when he decided to have some fun with fireworks in front of his horrified friends. Specifically, he lit a mortar firework and he held it up above his head. When his friends begged him to reconsider, Tyler told them he would be fine. He'd done it before. Shortly after that, his head was on fire, and then he was dead. Another particularly dumb case of this happening back in 1997 made all the local papers. An aspiring bungee jumper named Eric Barcia decided that he didn't need to go to official classes, and he just freestyled the whole thing himself. What could possibly go wrong? Eric was going to bungee jump off a bridge in Reston, Virginia, and he was real precise about the whole affair. He bought a number of bungee cords and he started tying them together, figuring he'd need about a combined 70 feet of cord to safely make the jump off the side without hitting the bottom. Well, the problem was Eric forgot to account for the fact that, bungee cords stretch. Realizing that was probably his last thought before his brains became one with the concrete. But plunging to your death during a failed attempt to bungee jump isn't nearly as embarrassing as doing the same thing while trying to play into a cringy internet trend. Remember planking? It's okay if you don't. It was a huge thing back in 2011. People would lay down in a rigid position, kinda like a plank, normally in a place where it would be weird, inconvenient, and dangerous to do it. In other words, anywhere that isn't your bed. A man living in Brisbane, Australia, ended up dying while trying to achieve planking supremacy. He tried to plank on the balcony of a 7th-story window, where he lost his balance and then tumbled down to the ground. Paramedics tried to revive him, but he was lost within 20 minutes of the fall. He probably got really good at planking when his rigor mortis set in. Sticking with the theme of the endless war between human beings and gravity, we need to wind the clock back to October 2010 and head over to the nation of South Korea. This is where one man's frustration at a lack of accessibility led to him having a Darwin-worthy demise. At a shopping center in Daejeon, a 40-year-old man in a motorized wheelchair known only as Mr. Lee was approaching an elevator when the doors slid shut right in front of him. We don't know what kind of day he was having before that, but it must have been a frustrating one because he started ramming his wheelchair up against the doors. And then he did it again, causing the doors to rattle from all the stress. And then he did it one more time, and the doors broke. Mr. Lee tipped forward and fell down a 19-foot shaft to his death. If only he were just a little more patient, he wouldn't be counted among the Darwin Award crew. But that is nowhere near as weird as our next one. Back in 1998, an Argentinian man named Luis Alberto Camargo was in the middle of throwing his wife out of a window. And that's not even the death here. Luis and his wife were just having an argument when things went from 0 to 100 pretty quickly. But lucky for the wife, she landed on some nearby power lines without getting shocked. Those held her up in place and saved her from her fall. Luis must have had a last-minute change of heart. Or maybe he just wanted to finish the job. He jumped out of the window after his shell-shocked wife, but missed the power lines and fell to his death. She, meanwhile, was rescued without incident. Our next story is a lot more tragic. Sometimes your relentless drive to get those gains might lead your family experiencing losses. As the family of a 61-year-old man who died early in 2025 found out, while accompanying his wife for an MRI, he graciously helped her off of the table. But he must have missed that memo about not bringing any metal objects in when approaching an extremely powerful magnet. But he wasn't just carrying some loose change or a pen. No, he was wearing a 20-pound weight training chain around his neck. The second he approached his wife, he was dragged toward the MRI at rapid speeds and killed in the process. There are plenty of ways our favorite hobbies can get you killed. Some are more stupid than others. One particularly dangerous hobby is riding a motorcycle, and we're not actually talking about motorcycle accidents here. Early in 2025, an Italian motorcyclist, Omar Farangzin, was riding a famously beautiful road in Romania when he happened upon an adorable brown bear. He even took some selfies and videos with furry animals to mark the special occasion. A day later, he made the terrible mistake of trying to feed a mother bear and got dragged into a ravine and eaten alive for his trouble. Now, if you've seen The Revenant, just picture that, except without the part where he lives at the end. Don't mess with mama bears. That's something you really should learn if you ever plan on going vacation to Romania, or anywhere with bears. But you don't really need to go all the way to Romania to have a bizarre, gruesome, and downright dumb death on the roads. You could ask a certain 19-year-old road worker from Oklahoma, if he hadn't been made one with the very roads he worked on. Back in 2020, he was helping to pave a new area of road when he noticed asphalt on the tires of the pavement roller he was operating. So he did the sensible thing and he climbed out of the vehicle to lube up the tires with some diesel. But in the process, he fell over and the pavement roller just went right over him. He was proclaimed dead at the scene. Because when the only way to get you out of the ground is with a big spatula, it's safe to say you're probably not alive. Think getting flattened by heavy machinery is gruesome? Sorry to say that doesn't even hold a candle to this next horrifyingly stupid death. A man in Indiana with two passions, sex and solvent abuse, fused the two in the most upsetting way imaginable. Back in 2021, this fellow was getting amorous with his lady friend when he realized that there wasn't a condom in sight. But he wasn't the kind of irresponsible guy to have unsafe sex. No. Thankfully, seeing as the two of them were already having some fun sniffing different epoxies and resins, he decided that these wonder chemicals could pull double duty in getting him high and keeping him safe. So he glued his third eye shut. Now, you may be feeling years getting actively stripped off of your life from the sheer psychic image of hearing that, but not as many years as were instantly stripped off of this poor young pervert. He was rushed to the hospital and died of multiple organ failure from a mix of inhaling the various chemicals and then using them as the world's most dangerous prophylactic. It's important to wear protection, whether we're talking about in the bedroom or out on the road. Philip A. Contos' bizarre decisions turned him into road pizza in 2011 when he took part in a protest in New York. What was he protesting? Civil rights, an end to the war or world hunger, policies to combat the ongoing threat of climate change. Nope, he was protesting mandatory helmet laws for bikers. The very helmet that may have saved his life after going over the handlebars during the protest, where he smashed his head and died. Remember the unfortunate Italian guy who got eaten by a bear in Romania? Plenty of people die Darwin Awards deaths after being irresponsible with animals. But that goes double when you add social media into the mix. This all came together like a perfect storm to send a 28-year-old man in Thailand off to the next life. He was found dead in a resort room with two telltale pieces of evidence: a snake bite on his upper arm and a live cobra with a bound-up mouth sitting inside a plastic bag. So what on earth happened here? Investigators found the answer when they looked at the man's phone, where he had recorded multiple videos of himself playing with the snake for that hot content on his socials. He did end up going viral, ironically, but only as that dumb guy who died because he handled a deadly snake for social media. This next death is one we do feel kind of bad about. Deepak Mahabar was by all accounts a really nice guy. When someone in his area reported a snake in their home, he would swoop in, remove the snake at no charge, and release it back into the wild. But after one snake rescue, Mahabar realized he needed to go pick up his kid from school. So to save time, he wrapped the snake around his neck to motorcycle off to his kid's school. This would be the mistake that led to his downfall. That snake that he'd wrapped around his neck was venomous, and over the course of the ride, it had bit him. He sadly died the next morning. It's an important reminder that no matter how much experience you have, you should never get too comfortable handling wild animals. But you don't need to get wild to die a stupid Darwin-worthy death. It's just as likely to happen in your own backyard. Take John Lewis of Minterworth, England in 1999, who decided to just do a little lawn work. He trimmed his shrubs, he put all the trimmings into a neat little pile, which he then doused with gasoline. You might think you know where this one is going, but trust us, you don't. He threw a lit match onto this gasoline-soaked tinder pile and it immediately exploded. And because of course it did, it set John on fire. He needed to put this blaze out fast or he would be his own last garden barbecue. But thankfully there was a river nearby, so he just jumped in, putting out the fire and saving his life. Well, from the fire, anyway. Because John, in all of his haste to stop himself from burning to death, forgot that he couldn't swim and he promptly drowned. His body was carried off a few miles downstream before anybody found it. If it makes John feel any better, though, his wasn't the most embarrassing death caused by gasoline. That would be down to leaded gasoline's inventor, Thomas Midgley Jr. Well, we know today that leaded gasoline was a toxic nightmare that literally made people dumber and more violent. Back then, people had no idea. Midgley Jr. was so convinced that it was safe that he spent his entire life in close proximity to it, and he saw his health get worse and worse. Later on in life, he caught polio, which left him severely disabled. He built a complicated system of ropes and pulleys to give him some kind of mobility, even in his bedridden state. But his overcomplicated system was exactly what killed him in the end. He got tangled up in it and strangled himself in 1944 at the age of 55. It's long been a debate whether it'd be more painful to burn or drown to death, and that's been a hard one to settle given that nobody has ever experienced both and lived to tell the tale. But one thing that is worse than either is experiencing one of them with the added humiliation that was all due to a stupid mistake. Just ask Peter Völgy, both former deputy chairman of the Council of Ministers in Hungary and former living person, after a visit to a metalworking factory in Miskolc back in 1973. It was a typical photo op, really. Politician shows that he cares about the common working folk by putting on a hard hat and touring a workplace for a few hours. But the unfortunate deputy chairman took a little too close of an interest in the most dangerous part of the factory, the casting pit. That's the area where they put the impossibly hot liquid metal into large molds so they can cool it into different shapes. As Petar admired his future death pit, a crane suddenly lurched out of control, shoving him straight into the casting pit. He landed between two of the molds and got absolutely charred, his suit burning all the way to his skin. They managed to rescue him after a lot of time and effort, but sadly he died after a period of agonizing pain in the hospital. Speaking of politics, let's go to the weird world of war, which lends itself to a lot of unpleasant and stupid deaths. War can be so dangerous that even pretend TV shows about war can get people killed in stupid ways. American director Boris Sagal had a completely avoidable death while filming the 1982 TV miniseries World War III. When trying to get into his private helicopter, he approached from the rear and then just walked straight into the helicopter blades, partially decapitating the unfortunate director. Seagal's death came from not looking where he was going. Our next death came out of sheer unbridled rage. Back in 2020, two men in New South Wales, Australia got into a road rage incident. Well, rather than trying to work it out, they decided to park it on the side of the highway and get out to engage in a fistfight. But karma for dropping their social civility came swiftly, as a fast-moving truck accidentally collided with both men at once as they battled it out in the middle of the road, killing them instantly. The trucker was in shock after that, but if he was able to pull himself together and get one more, he would be eligible for a kill streak. Sometimes men of God aren't necessarily God's favorite people, which is why you will find a lot of preachers with bizarre Darwin Award deaths, like Kyle Lake of Waco, Texas, who died a totally unnecessary death back in 2005. While delivering a sermon during a baptism, he fully immersed the person in water, and then, noticing the congregation struggling to hear him, he reached out to adjust the microphone on the stage. And this was why Lake received a fatal electric shock in front of his entire audience. But phenomenally stupid deaths aren't a modern invention either. We have found people causing their own totally avoidable doom as early as 1601, including the death of astronomer Tycho Brahe, who was the last major astronomer before the invention of the telescope. Tycho was already a man that maybe didn't have the best judgment despite his intelligence. He had a history of getting into duels. He even had a metal prosthetic nose for the better part of his life after getting the top half of his original nose cut off. But despite being a duelist, he was undeniably extremely polite. And so it was his politeness, not his history of dueling, that got him killed. He was attending a banquet in Prague when knocking back a little too much wine led to him needing to go to the bathroom. Etiquette rules were a lot more serious back in 1601, and Tycho didn't want to embarrass himself by leaving the party to go drain the sea monster, so he stuck it out until he didn't even need to pee anymore. He then died 11 days later in excruciating pain, likely from a severe bladder infection caused by refusing to pee. Nothing ruins the vibe of a dinner party quite like realizing after the fact that you literally held it in until it killed you. But that is still not as embarrassing as the death of the famous English statesman Francis Bacon, who was always trying to figure things out. You would think that this death would be related to one of his more dangerous experiments, maybe trying to invent a new weapon or energy source. But no, he was trying to preserve a chicken. He would die 25 years after Tycho Brahe after stuffing a bunch of snow into a chicken to see if it would preserve the meat for later consumption, which was a really new idea at the time. Sadly, the only result of this experiment was Francis Bacon catching a deadly case of pneumonia. Speaking of historical figures who died pointless and humiliating deaths in the cold, let's talk about the United States' most inconsequential president. The death of William Henry Harrison was sealed during his 1841 inauguration speech. He had been exhausted from a long campaign, and he ignored the advice of his counsel to wear winter clothes for the freezing weather. But President Harrison decided he would just rough it, and in the process he caught pneumonia, and he died not long after. This made him the president with the shortest term in U.S. history. Now how about we lighten things up with another thoroughly stupid animal-related death? While swimming near the Texas-Louisiana border, 28-year-old Tommy Woodward and a female friend came across a body of water marked with a sign that said "No swimming." Warning of gators. But Tommy, he wasn't worried. He stripped down and jumped in anyway. And he was obviously eaten by those gators. When your time is up, it's up. But some people don't wait for the reaper, they call him over. A preacher delivering a sermon to a den of lions. A terrorist arming a bomb vest just as a text arrives. A gangster casting his fishing line beneath live power cables. What could possibly go wrong? On today's episode of the Infographics Show, we're looking at the brilliant minds worthy of the Darwin Awards. Troy Leon Gregg murdered 2 people in 1973 during a robbery attempt. He was sentenced to death, and his crimes were so heinous that the state Supreme Court upheld that decision. But that is not how Gregg died. In 1980, Gregg and 3 other inmates became the first men on death row to escape Reidsville State Prison. All he had to do afterward was lay low and not draw attention to himself. But Gregg, he wasn't that kind of guy. To celebrate his newfound freedom, he went to a biker bar frequented by members of the Outlaws Motorcycle Club. He got extremely drunk and he tried hitting on a waitress who wanted nothing to do with him. When he turned violent, a group of bikers quickly stepped in and beat him to death. And it all happened on the same day he escaped. Troy Leon Gregg isn't the only inmate to get executed by natural selection. Michael Anderson Godwin was a violent man with a history of robbery, assault, and murder in South Carolina. But he narrowly avoided the electric chair, receiving a life sentence instead. One that, with good behavior, might eventually have led to parole. But while serving his time, Michael made the bizarre decision to try to repair a pair of wired headphones by chewing through the wires like a raccoon. Unfortunately for him, he was also sitting on his wet metal prison toilet at the time. His body turned into a living and then not living transistor. Can't get the electric chair? Make your own. You've heard of a life hack, this is a death hack. The real shame is that it seems Michael really turned it around in prison. He was seen as a model prisoner by many, had earned 2 different degrees in education and hoped to work with young people upon his release. Now his legacy will be a footnote on a Wikipedia page called Toilet-Related Injuries and Deaths. Sometimes Darwin Awards deaths are like the dark side of freedom. We have the right to do stupid and dangerous stuff in life. And that was a point argued by 21-year-old Derek Kuiper back in 2004. He wrote an op-ed for the Daily Nebraskan titled, "Individual Rights Buckle Under Seatbelt Laws." In the article, he argued that seatbelt laws step on our personal freedoms. Interestingly, at the start of this article, there's an editor's note saying the Daily Nebraskan is no longer accepting feedback to this column. And that's because Derek Kuiper lived and died by his principles, losing his life in a high-speed rendezvous with his own windshield just weeks after penning the article. He likely would have survived if only he was wearing a seatbelt. There are plenty of ways you can die doing high-risk, low-reward stupidity. Just ask 23-year-old Michael Genter, though he might struggle to answer with something lodged in his throat. That and the fact that he died back in 1998. Genter was dared by 3 of his idiot friends to swallow a 5-inch fish whole. But because Michael was not the throat goat, we'll meet one of those later, he started to choke, the fish's tail sticking out of his mouth like something straight from a cartoon. Despite their attempts, his friends were unable to dislodge the fish from their buddy's gullet. Eventually, they called the emergency services, but sadly, it was already too late. While it was obviously a tragedy, the death was pretty dumb and avoidable. So much so that even the local police shared poor Michael in the news afterwards. Major Mike Matulovich was quoted as saying, "If I dare you to jump off a bridge and you do it, and you're 23 years of age, you're stupid." And harsh as it may be, it's honestly pretty tough to disagree with him on that. But fish weren't the only animals tangled up in these Darwin Awards. In 1981, David Kerwin decided to visit the majestic Yellowstone National Park. 24-year-old Kerwin, along with his friend Ronald Ratliff and Ratliff's dog Moosey, were out exploring the hot springs. The area was plastered with signs warning visitors to stay clear of the geysers, where the acidic water was nearly hitting boiling temperatures. Of course, that didn't apply to Moosey. Being a dog, he can't read. So the pooch jumped in, and he promptly began changing states of matter at alarming speed. Kerwin immediately jumped into the geyser to save the dog, despite the fact that the only way to get some of Moosey back would have been a metal bucket on the end of a very tall crane. He was instantly horrifically burned, destroying his eyes and skin and flash-frying his internal organs. His friend was able to drag him out of the geyser by his mostly intact hand, and by all accounts his last words before succumbing to his injuries were, "How bad am I? That was a stupid thing I did." He was dead by the next day, despite hospital workers trying their best to save him. Okay, so that one was really sad. Let's go for a Darwin death that's a little more whimsical, like the demise of Madame Sophie Blanchard, one of Europe's most famous balloonists. In the late 1700s, she rode the skies in hot air balloons, the cutting edge of transport in the day. Her husband, Jean-Pierre, was a pioneer of gas-powered balloons until he suffered a fatal heart attack mid-flight. And because balloonists, like balloons themselves, always need to go out with a bang, Blanchard decided to follow suit. She had an amazing idea, a fireworks show from her balloon in front of an assembled crowd, and because the Hindenburg was still well over a century away, she had no idea how badly this could go. The fireworks set her balloon ablaze before a horrified crowd, and Blanchard fought desperately to regain control, but it was a lost cause. The basket struck the top of a nearby roof as it fell, making it flip onto the side and throw Madame Blanchard to her death on the streets below. On the bright side, it wasn't the flames that finished her. Gravity made sure it was quick. Now moving on from balloonists to bodybuilders. Iceland always seems to produce some of the world's biggest, strongest men, and one of the original examples of this was a strongman called Jean-Paul Sigmarsson. He was so obsessed with lifting that his quest to get those reps up became a part of Iceland's national identity. But the problem with Sigmarsson was that he just didn't know how to stop. He once said in an interview, "There's no reason to be alive if you can't deadlift." And Sigmarsson's obsession was about to make the dead part in deadlift a lot more literal. Sigmarsson had a congenital heart defect, something he was well aware of. It was a problem that at least 3 other members of his family were diagnosed with. And despite this, he did a crazy amount of steroids in his quest to be the biggest, buffest man in the world. Sigmarsson knew that his health was failing, and he'd even scheduled an appointment at a private heart clinic in the US. But that didn't stop him from deadlifting. He lifted so hard that his heart literally broke, a condition known as an aortic rupture, in 1993, killing him. Well, sometimes it's okay to skip arm day, especially if you want to avoid getting a Darwin Award. Next, a death so pointless and avoidable, it actually inspired his own death award. American politician Herman Cain raised eyebrows during the COVID-19 pandemic. He dismissed the virus as nothing to worry about and urged people to carry on as normal for the sake of the economy, even as it had already killed hundreds of thousands worldwide. This was a particularly bold claim for Cain to make because as a 74-year-old cancer survivor, he was part of an at-risk group. But Cain, for all his faults, was morally consistent. He appeared at public events without a mask just to show how safe it was. And then he caught COVID and died. He was such a social media power user that even death couldn't stop him from tweeting, or at least couldn't stop his team from posting from his account, including posts downplaying the very disease that had killed him. The Herman Cain Award was established for people downplaying COVID before getting their metaphorical cheeks absolutely clapped by it. What a legacy! But that death seems downright tame and rational compared to our next one, the horrifying radioactive demise of golfer and industrialist Eben Byers. How did poor Eben get so lethally irradiated? Was he caught in the blast of a nuclear bomb? At the wrong place at the wrong time? During a nuclear power plant meltdown? Nope, he was drinking the stuff. Eben was absolutely obsessed with a health supplement called Radithor. The advertising boasted that each bottle contained at least 1 microcurie of each of the radium-226 and 228 isotopes. Byers' doctor even claimed that it had such positive health effects that Eben drank several doses a day. What could possibly go wrong? Well, a lot. Eben's skin started to melt. The radiation gave him such aggressive cancer that his bottom jaw literally fell off in the last years of his life. This led to an extremely painful and totally avoidable death back in 1932. Eben was the most infamous casualty of the radium fad, where the poorly understood and extremely dangerous radioactive isotope was included in a huge range of products. It was touted for its supposed health benefits while actively killing people. Who knows how many deaths will be attributed to current TikTok health trends a century from now? These next deaths proved that even the big man upstairs can't stop the Darwin Awards, not even for his biggest fans. John Allen Chau was a 26-year-old American missionary on a one-man mission to convert isolated tribes to Christianity. Missionaries are sketchy enough at the best of times, but Chau decided to play on hard mode, attempting to illegally reach North Sentinel Island on November 15, 2018. Now, North Sentinel Island is home of the Sentinelese, a tribe of extremely territorial people who do not want outside visitors, and they will react with extreme violence if their boundaries are ignored. But they've got a very good reason for that. They've been so isolated from the rest of humanity that they haven't developed the same immunities as the rest of us. Any visitor from the outside world risks putting the entire tribe in mortal danger, with pathogens considered common for the rest of us. But John Allen Chau didn't care about that. He spent 3 days annoying the tribe before they killed him and moved on. But if you thought the Sentinelese were a tough crowd, that is nothing compared to the audience chosen by Nigerian preacher Daniel Abodunrin. Lions. Actual, literal lions. Abodunrin took his cue from another Daniel in the Bible, the one tossed into a lion's den and expected to be torn apart. However, OG Daniel was able to tame the lions by reading scripture. That's a pretty Chad move, honestly. Abodunrin had promoted himself as a self-styled prophet, so he figured maybe he could repeat his namesake's stunt and put himself on the religious map. And this is where things went bad. In 1991, Daniel decided to break into the university zoo in the city of Ibadan on Easter Sunday. He began speaking in tongues at the lions, and naturally they were pretty confused and gave the preacher a wide berth. If Daniel had any kind of sense, he would have left right then and there and called that a dub. But no, he got cocky. Daniel persisted and got closer to the lions, calling on the, quote, God of Daniel to keep him safe. And then the lions tore him to shreds. Can you really say you're surprised? Staying in the religious theme, Melvin Nurse was a youth pastor doing everything he could to make his young congregation fly straight, up to and including some pretty extreme visual metaphors. He wanted to scare the youths he was tutoring into not following the path of drugs, gun violence, and sin. He did this by bringing a gun to church, specifically a revolver, so he could illustrate that the life of sin is like playing Russian roulette. Can you see where this is going? Melvin loaded a blank into the gun in front of the crowd, gave the cylinder a theatrical spin, and then pulled the trigger next to his head. The problem was, he didn't know that blanks can still be extremely dangerous. In front of a crowd of 250 people, including his wife and several children, the gun went off. The force of the blank's explosion launched a chunk of Nurse's skull into his brain. He died of his injuries 5 days later. Strangely enough, the ordeal did leave some of the congregants with a newfound fear of gun violence. After the incident, one of the at-risk youths gave up his gun to his parents, hoping to avoid the same fate. So, all's well that it ends well, we guess? Kinda? Maybe? Let's take one last look at a preacher who got an express path to the pearly gates. Plenty of Pentecostal ministers proved their faith by handling venomous snakes. One of the unluckiest was the very man who started this idiotic trend in the first place. On July 24, 1955, George Went Hensley was in the middle of one of his rousing snake handling sessions. These involved him hoisting venomous serpents overhead while chanting in tongues. It might have been a great time for his parishioners, but it wasn't such a good time for the snakes. He took one out of the box and he walked around his congregation giving a speech about the power of faith with the snake wrapped around his neck. It went pretty well, until he put it back in the box when that snake then bit him on the wrist. George was dead by the next morning. Because if God exists, he has a really dark sense of humor. But even messing with snakes and lions weren't as dangerous as the life of Hyder Korkmaz, a powerful drug trafficker in the Amsterdam underworld. That's already the kind of lifestyle that would put someone in danger. But Hyder's odds of survival dropped even further after he was arrested and cut a deal with the Dutch authorities. He agreed to testify against crime boss Willem Holleder, a terrifying figure who would have had no problem getting Hyder whacked to save himself. You would think, knowing your testimony could be vital for putting a mob boss behind bars, you would decide to lay low for a bit. Maybe get a PlayStation and catch up on your gaming list at an undisclosed safe house. But no, Hyder decided he would rather be out in the open, indulging in his favorite hobby, fly fishing. Hyder, against all advice on the matter, chose a spot right next to some high-tension power cables. And when he whipped back his line, it connected to one of the live wires, killing him instantly. One of the major motivators behind organized crime is greed, and plenty of gangsters have won Darwin Awards by letting that destroy them. We can't think of a better example than the literal plane load of top Soviet military brass back in 1981. They died in a fiery crash that killed 50 people and left the Pacific Fleet of the USSR with no senior officers. In the immediate aftermath, accusations flew left and right. Some said it was the US, in a notable escalation of Cold War violence. Some suggested it was a saboteur within the Soviet military hoping to kill his way into a promotion by creating a sudden vacancy above him. The truth of what actually happened was much simpler and much dumber. Because the USSR was notoriously corrupt, those soon-to-be obliterated generals had just gone on a lavish shopping spree in the regime's exclusive stores, the kind that the average Soviet citizen probably didn't even know existed. The military men had shoved so much swag into the plane that it was improperly secured, resulting in the fatal crash. This might be the first time a whole group of idiots has had to share their Darwin Award, but it's what these dearly deceased communists probably would have wanted. Staying in Russia, in 2011, as the New Year's celebration in Red Square approached, a woman known as the Black Widow prepared a bomb vest, alone in her home. She was part of a terrorist group who had already killed 35 people in a previous attack on a Moscow airport. This time, with an explosion during a New Year celebration, she was gonna kill even more. But there was an unprecedented hero: spam texts. The Black Widow had wired her cell phone to be the detonator for her bomb vest, but she had used her regular phone rather than a burner. When her phone received a spam text, some sources say a Happy New Year message, the bomb vest detonated instantly, killing the Black Widow and sparing every one of her intended victims. A profoundly lame way to go out for someone with such a scary nickname. Weirdly, she's not even the only Russian to go up in a totally avoidable Great Ball of Fire on this list. Unlike the Black Widow, Alexander Chechik was not a terrorist, but he somehow still came into possession of a grenade. And naturally, he decided to do a little trolling. He sent a picture of the grenade to a friend who immediately asked him if he was okay. Alex responded with, "Depends on what you mean by okay," along with a picture of the same grenade with the pin pulled out. The friend, who presumably experienced a truly historic blood pressure spike at that moment, immediately messaged his friend back telling him not to mess around. But it was already too late. Alex was under the misconception that even if the pin was removed from a grenade, it wouldn't actually explode unless you threw it. Well, that turned out to be a fatal miscalculation. Alexander never replied to his friend's text, presumably because he was a little busy existing in multiple zip codes after the grenade went off. A lot of stupid, unavoidable deaths seem to come from people in precarious situations just being plain bored. That was the fate of Davi Nunes Moreira, a Brazilian who took on a truly bizarre online challenge. In a viral trend that we assume never spread beyond Brazil, he killed a butterfly, ground it up, mixed it with water, and then he injected it into his leg. And just like that, he was dead. He might not have gone viral, but his blood definitely went toxic. But dying during dumb challenges is not a uniquely modern phenomenon by any means. According to some accounts, that is exactly what happened to Tiberius Claudius Drusus, son of Roman Emperor Claudius. Not long after he was betrothed for marriage, Drusus was doing his favorite party trick, throwing a pear up into the air and catching it in his mouth. But Drusus's title as the throat goat of Rome ended in the dumbest way possible. The falling pear lodged in his throat, and he choked to death before anyone could save him. Getting assassinated would have been a much more dignified way to go. Let's stay in the ancient world for another death that was completely stupid and avoidable. They say men often meet their dumb destinies on the very roads they take to avoid them, and there is no better example than Qin Shi Huang, the founder of the Qin dynasty, and the first Chinese ruler to call himself emperor instead of just king. But Qin's life was ruled by one enduring obsession: severe thanatophobia, the unhealthy fear of death. Although he had a pretty good reason for this obsession, to be fair. As emperor, he was constantly surviving assassination attempts and decided to solve his problem once and for all. He ordered his court alchemists to crack the secret to immortality, and given the glorious emperor would likely have them executed for failing in this task, they had considerable motivation to get the job done fast. Qin was over the moon when they brought him an immortality tincture, and then he was under the ground after he drank it. And that was because the magic immortality potion contained, among other things, mercury, which will magically guarantee you never die of old age if you drink enough of it. Speaking of guys chasing immortality only to die Darwin style, let's talk about the supposed death of the ancient Greek philosopher Empedocles. It's worth noting that a lot of ancient historians took a liberal view of the truth when recounting their histories. Think of them like YouTubers of their day. They wanted to get more eyes on their work than that of competing writers and historians, so they sexed it up a bit. One of the most famous legends about Empedocles' death claims that he aspired to godhood. To either prove that he was divine or ascend to it, he climbed Mount Etna in Sicily and jumped straight into an active volcano. But this didn't prove that Empedocles was immortal, just that he was extremely flammable. If he didn't achieve godhood, we can at least say that he achieved a Darwin Award. While we're on the stupid mythic deaths of the ancient Greeks, we have to mention another philosopher, Heraclitus. He spent his final years as a mountain hermit, convinced that he had dropsy, an ancient diagnosis of the body retaining excess fluid. Heraclitus, in all of his wisdom, decided to use an old homespun cure to get those extra fluids out and return himself to good health. He leaped into a huge pile of cow manure, hoping that the heat would evaporate the liquid in his body. Well, that was not the case. The elderly and frail Heraclitus got stuck inside of the cow poop and was then eaten by a roving pack of wild dogs. And we can't think of a better and more humiliating way to end the list than with Atlas Fredonier. He was a Swiss pioneer who discovered Fredonier Pass in 1850 and was also convicted of assaulting his stepdaughter. In 1880, Atlas was experiencing intestinal problems, and so he decided he would perform an ill-considered and disgusting home remedy, shoving a 16-ounce bottle of magnesium citrate right up his own Fredonier Pass, where it immediately got stuck. After trying to remove the bottle himself to avoid the public humiliation, he went to a local hospital, but that wouldn't help him. During efforts to remove the bottle, the top broke, literally tearing him a new one. While some parts were removed, Atlas's O-ring was beyond repair. He bled to death shortly after. There's nothing better than making new friends. That's why you're traveling to an isolated island to spread the good word to an uncontacted indigenous tribe. Okay, so the government says this isn't wise, and maybe they've chased you off twice already with arrows, but soon you'll be winning an award. Well, yeah, but not a Nobel Prize. The Darwin Awards are a satirical award ceremony celebrating the few, the proud, the stupid, who remove themselves from the gene pool by doing something unbelievably stupid. There are only a few rules. They can only remove themselves from the gene pool in the event, and they must die or render themselves unable to reproduce via other means. Let's take a look at some of the most famous winners. Is this a highlight reel or an in memoriam? On this episode of the Infographics Show. Number 11. It was April in Italy, and one man was thirsty, so thirsty in fact that nothing sounded better than a tall drink of water. He needed a supermarket, but there was just one problem. It was Easter Sunday, and in the very original seat of Roman Catholicism, that meant everything was closed. So he did the only thing that made sense. He snuck in the back to look for some delicious H2O, and he found it. Towering as high as the sky, a massive pallet full of large packs of water bottles. But he wasn't going to let that stop him. He would just need to jimmy one loose. What could go wrong? Well, he never found out. The supermarket employees did, though, coming in to find a massive pile of collapsed crates. They started digging them loose, and they found a horrifying sight. Underneath was the dead man pinned by the very water he had been seeking. The CCTV footage made it clear what happened. The man had tried to pry a crate of water loose from the middle of the tower and was immediately crushed by a massive pile of heavy bottles and not a drop to drink. Sometimes it's best to just leave well enough alone. Number 10. Pastor Sean was a man of God, but he was also a Florida man, and that would spell his end one day in 2022. It was a warm March day on Lake Seminole, and the pastor and his friend took the boat out. His mistakes started then. He couldn't swim, but he declined to wear a life vest, and sure enough, the boat stalled out in the water. The sheriff had to be called, and a boat soon arrived to bring the two men back to shore. But alas, the pastor's wayward boat was lost, as the sheriff wasn't a tow service. And as for Pastor Sean, it was no man or boat left behind. The pastor called a friend to get him back out on the lake again, and once again he forgot to take a life jacket. It was getting late when he got back out to his boat to try to start it again. He jumped from his friend's boat and capsized it. He was immediately floundering in the water. His friend tried to pull him up and nearly capsized his own boat, and without the life vest to grab onto, he had no way to get a good grip. And so the pastor sunk down to the depths of Lake Seminole and was no doubt welcomed into the afterlife by a chorus of Florida men shooting off illegal fireworks. We all love pets, but this man loved them a little too much. Number 9. In terms of rare and ridiculous deaths, getting bitten by a venomous snake is not up there. It happens. It's part of the risk of keeping them or handling them. So when police came to make a welfare check on the home of a Maryland resident, David Riston, it wasn't a big surprise to find him dead on the floor due to a snake bite. The man was known to enjoy keeping them, and the odds go up with each snake he handled. But let's just hope that none of the reporting officers had a snake phobia, because this man took testing fate to the next level. Mr. Riston had over 124 snakes in his home, many of them venomous, including rattlesnakes and cobras, but also black mambas, one of the deadliest species of snake in the world. He also had a giant python in case he wanted some variety in his accidental death. The snakes all seemed to be kept in safe enclosures, but one decided to go for a jailbreak, and that led to the end of the unfortunate Mr. Riston. If reincarnation is a thing, maybe embrace the simple joys of hamsters in the next life. There's road rage, and then there's these two brain trusts. Number 8. Berkeley, California, 2021. Everyone on the route is trying to get to work. Someone cuts a few corners, and the next thing you know, there's a collision. Fortunately, no one's injured, for now, because one driver just got out of his car to confront the other driver. And here's the other guy, because one bad decision deserves another. Suddenly, everyone driving gets treated to a show of these two chuckleheads arguing with each other and making threats. And did we mention this wasn't a country road? It was Interstate 80. Soon enough, the inevitable happened. A Mini Cooper swerved to avoid one of the damaged cars and collided directly with the two bickering motorists, sending them flying. Both were dead at the scene. The Mini Cooper driver was deeply traumatized, and it's likely that Highway Patrol had to issue a statement. Please pull over to the nearest rest stop before getting into a brawl over your damaged vehicle. It's safer for everyone, and you can get a donut once you're done fighting. Not many people build their own death trap. Number 7. Mr. Harvey Fite was an ambitious man, and he loved one thing: stonework. He spent years building a massive 6-acre collection of hand-built stone bridges, moats, and sculptures. And by 1976, the 72-year-old was ready to celebrate his life's work. Now he just needed to maintain it. The old-school artist could live among his magnum opus, or at least he could, for a short time, until one day when riding his lawnmower, Harvey decided to get a little too close to one of his stone creations and proceeded to face-plant right off the ledge. Okay, lots of people fall off lawnmowers each year, and if you don't fall under the blades, you're probably gonna be okay. Maybe a bit banged up, but the thing about stone is, it is really hard, and Mr. Fite was killed instantly. Maybe it's just us, but if you're rich enough to create a massive stone quarry as a testament to your power over nature's mightiest objects, you're probably rich enough to hire lawn care. But then few people have built themselves as impressive a memorial as Mr. Fite. Dying building your own Stonehenge is impressive, but this next man picked an even more ancient way to pass on. Number 6. Hawaii is a gorgeous place filled with palm trees, blue lagoons, and volcanoes. And those volcanoes are safe to admire and even visit with caution. Lava doesn't argue, and when you see a sign warning of lava, it's probably best to turn back quickly. After all, this isn't the movies, and you can't have lava ooze right up to you and jump over it. But one ambitious 75-year-old hiker decided he knew better. One night he decided he wanted to see the lava flow up close and personal. Well, he got his wish. Volcanoes National Park is one of the most magnificent sights in the country. But when you see a sign saying "turn back or you will die," it is best to listen. And so he soldiered on into the night when the lava was no doubt extra stunning. We hope he enjoyed it because he didn't come back. On Monday morning, the search parties turned up and he was later found dead. We suspect he'd say the same thing Mr. Fite did. "I'm too old to care about your silly safety rules." In former Soviet Union, laptop downloads you. Number 5. Being a Russian soldier in Ukraine isn't a fun time. You were likely drafted against your will, you're facing death if you desert, and the Russian military's primary strategy seems to be throw bodies at the front lines to slow down the Ukrainian military. So they've got to take some pleasure when they can find it. And as for one soldier in 2022, he was excited to find an abandoned MacBook in the middle of a war zone. Maybe he could use it to stream some Stranger Things while he was in Ukraine, since Netflix is banned in Russia. Now he just needed to find a place to store it. Fortunately, there was a convenient spot in his chest plate. He just needed to remove this one silly piece of armor, and that was actually a ballistic plate designed to repel bullets. Sure enough, he got shot, and MacBooks aren't bulletproof. He was killed immediately, and people who handled his body afterwards also found a stolen iPad on his person. I hope that episode of BoJack Horseman was worth it. This next guy took home security to the next level. Number 4. Ronald Sear, 65, was a Maine man who was nervous about keeping his house safe. He had a whole lot of expensive jewelry at home, and he didn't want to have to rely on his fast instincts to stop a burglar. So he decided to set up some DIY home defense. Based on the kid-friendly contraption that was used to pull out a loose tooth, he rigged up a handgun trigger to pull when the door was opened by someone who wasn't supposed to be there, and shoot the unlucky burglar as soon as they stepped inside. And it worked. A little too well. In 2019, Sear was shot dead. An investigation revealed that he had accidentally triggered his own pull-string death trap when he arrived home, maybe distracted or under the influence. We have a bit of sympathy for this Darwin Award winner. After all, he did pull off his own invention. But knowledge is being able to turn your own front door into a death trap, and wisdom is knowing that maybe you shouldn't. What's crazier than one Darwin Award winner? How about two? Number 3. Peer pressure is tricky, and we all remember our moms telling us, if all your friends jumped off a bridge, would you follow them? To which these 2 Texas men on vacation in Louisiana went, hell yeah! It was 2019 when the Lake Charles Black Bayou drawbridge was open to let boats through. The safety gate was down, and when our heroes drove up, they decided that they really didn't want to wait. So one man jumped out of the car, pushed up the safety gate, and jumped back in. As the driver hit the gas, they were either going to be legends or a different kind of legend. Despite what action movies might tell you, cars are not meant to jump over large open gaps. The car proceeded to plunge off the bridge and into the waves below. As it was 2 a.m., no workers were around to notify the authorities, and the car, along with the drowned men, were eventually found down below. Hey, at least best friends stick together to the end. And this next guy was a little too confident, and it was a long way down. Number 2. Gary Hoy was a smart man. You didn't get to be a lawyer without having some brains, but you probably also gotta be a little daring. He was giving a tour of his office tower to a group of law students and decided to show how good life could be once they were big, powerful corporate lawyers like him. The massive building was state-of-the-art, including supposedly unbreakable windows. He decided to show off the strength of the windows by throwing himself against them. It was a party trick that he'd done many times. And it worked. Until it didn't. See, the windows were unbreakable, but the window frame, not so much. The force of his impact dislodged the glass from its frame, and it sent the intact window and Mr. Hoy plummeting 24 floors to the ground below. Traumatizing for the students watching and for the larger group of students in the adjacent boardroom, no doubt. When asked about the window failure, structural engineer Bob Greer said that the windows were designed not to break, not to stand up to an attorney's tomfoolery. But no one failed to heat a point more than this last guy. Number 1. John Allen Chau was a young man who was driven by a single passion in life: to spread the word of God. A devout evangelical missionary, there was no place he wouldn't go if he thought people needed to learn about Christianity, including North Sentinel Island, an isolated island in the Bay of Bengal, a protected Indian territory. It's home to the Sentinelese, an isolated indigenous tribe known for being fiercely protective of their island. Laws prohibit traveling within 5 nautical miles of the island to protect the islanders from disease and to protect travelers from their defenses. But Chau didn't mind the law. He had God on his side. After being trained in missionary boot camp, Chau planned an initial first contact with the Sentinelese, which he believed could be, quote, Satan's last stronghold on earth, and he paid 2 fishermen to illegally ferry him over to the island. He made several attempts to contact them, but was met with a combination of mockery and hostility. When he delivered gifts, a boy shot an arrow at him that pierced his Bible. He made one final visit, and the last thing the fishermen saw was Chau's body being dragged away for burial by the visitors. They were soon arrested for violating the protection law and probably decided that they were out of the business of helping Americans. Want to know how people manage to die in the happiest place on earth? Check out totally messed up things that have happened at Walt Disney World, or watch this video instead.